Hi guys! Tonight we step into a world where the Ice Age is loosening its cold hand from the earth. You stand beneath a pale sky near a crackling fire, while frost silvering the grass glows in the dim light. Beyond the camp, the land stretches wide and quiet with low hills, scattered stones, and the distant blue wall of ice resting on the horizon like a sleeping giant. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what your local time is. It is always strangely comforting to imagine little pools of lamplight all around the world, people resting under different skies. Now dim the lights, and let yourself move backward, not just through years, but through a whole vanished climate. You're standing near the end of the last ice age around 12,000 years ago. The world is not frozen everywhere, despite what the name might suggest. There are no cartoon cavemen shivering beside solid blocks of ice, which is frankly a little disappointing for anyone raised on very committed museum dioramas. Instead, the planet is a patchwork of cold grasslands, open plains, tundra forests beginning to creep back, and immense ice sheets locked across the north. In North America, a vast body of ice still covers much of Canada and reaches down into parts of what are now the northern United States. In Europe, ice holds Scandinavia and nearby lands. Sea levels are lower than they are today because so much water is trapped in frozen form. Coastlines lie far beyond the beaches you would know now. Lands that are underwater in your time are open, windy places where people walk, hunt, gather, and leave footprints that the sea will later hide. You feel the cold first. It settles on your cheeks and slips under the edge of your hide cloak. The air smells clean, sharp, and faintly smoky from the fire behind you. There is damp earth beneath your feet, patched with old snow in shaded hollows. The wind moves through dry grass with a whispering sound, and somewhere in the distance an animal calls once, then falls silent. The people around you live in small groups, moving with the seasons. Their world is not primitive in the simple way people sometimes imagine. It is difficult, yes, and often dangerous, but it is also full of knowledge. They know which stones break into useful edges. They know where herds pass in spring. They know the moods of rivers, the taste of edible roots, the places where fuel can still be found when the land seems bare. They carry maps in memory, not on paper, and those maps are rich with paths, shelters, springs, dangers, and stories. A mainstream historical fact is that the end of the last ice age led into the Holocene, the warm, geological period in which all recorded human civilization would later unfold. You are standing near the threshold of that change. Not at a single dramatic doorway, of course. The Earth does not politely announce a new epoch with a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The shift unfolds slowly, unevenly, in pulses of warming pauses and sudden surprises. Around the fire you notice people repairing tools. A thin blade of flint flashes in the low light. Someone scrapes a hide stretched across a wooden frame. A child watches quietly, wrapped in fur eyes heavy with sleep. The fire pops, releasing the scent of resin from a small branch. Sparks drift upward, tiny orange stars rising into the cold dark. You walk a little away from the camp, not far enough to lose the warmth completely. The ground crunches softly. In the distance, the ice sheet catches the last light of evening. It is not merely a frozen wall. It is a force that has shaped everything here. It has carved valleys, ground stone into powder-blocked rivers, and pressed the land beneath its enormous weight. Even where the ice has retreated, it leaves behind ponds, gravel ridges, raw earth, and strange boulders carried from places far away. And yet if you listen closely, the world is changing. There is dripping water where once there was only hard frost. There are birds returning earlier. Shrubs are appearing in sheltered places. In some regions, reindeer paths are shifting. In others, new plants are spreading over ground that had long been too cold or too exposed. People notice these things. They may not speak of global climate because that is a modern phrase with a slightly office meeting flavour, but they understand change through lived experience. They see it in the animals, they feel it in the length of seasons, they measure it in hunger travel and the success of a hunt. A quirky lesser-known tidbit is that some Ice Age people used red ochre not only in art and burial practices, but also possibly for practical purposes such as treating hides, colouring objects, or even repelling insects. Imagine that. Long before modern camping sprays with labels no one reads properly, people may have been using mineral pigments in ways both symbolic and useful. You return toward the fire. The camp is small, but it feels alive with quiet purpose. There are no streets, no permanent walls, no fields, no kings, no written laws. Still, there is society here. There are relationships, duties, jokes, habits, memories, and probably at least one person who insists they know the best way to arrange the firewood. Some things may be older than civilization itself. Scholars remain divided on exactly how people in different regions experienced the end of the Ice Age, because the change was not the same everywhere. In one valley, warming may have meant better plant foods and easier travel. In another, it may have meant vanishing herds, unstable rivers, or flooded lowlands. The end of the Ice Age was not one simple story. It was many local stories unfolding at once, each shaped by weather, landscape, animals, and human choices. You sit beside the fire again, feeling its warmth on your knees while your back stays cool in the night air. Smoke curls slowly upward. Someone adds a bone to the edge of the flames, not for drama, but because fuel can be precious in open tundra landscapes where trees are scarce. The smell changes slightly earthy and bitter. A dog-like shape may be resting near the edge of the light, though in this early world the story of dogs is still unfolding. Above you the stars are startlingly clear. There is no city glow, no distant road, no window lit by electricity. The sky seems close enough to touch, crowded with bright points, and the pale river of the Milky Way. You might wonder what these people think when they look upward. Do they see ancestors, animals, trails, fires, warnings, stories? We cannot know with certainty, and perhaps that mystery is part of the quiet. For now you remain in this twilight between ages. Behind you lies a long world of ice migration endurance and great beasts moving across cold plains. Ahead lie forests, rivers, rising seas, villages, fields, and eventually the fur cities. But no one here knows that yet. They only know the evening, the fire, the changing wind, the need to sleep, wake, move, remember, and survive. And as the last blue light fades from the ice on the horizon, you feel the ancient world breathing slowly around you, not ending all at once, but softening, melting, and preparing in its own patient way to become something new. You remain near the edge of the camp as morning comes slowly, not with sudden brightness, but with a thin grey light spreading across the open land. The fire has settled into a bed of red coals. A little smoke rises from it, drifting low before the wind takes it. Around you, people begin to stir beneath hides and woven coverings, their movements quiet, practical and sleepy, in that very human way that apparently has not changed in 12,000 years. Before the warmth of this new age can be felt fully, it helps to understand the world you have entered. The last glacial period has shaped climates, coastlines, plants, animals, and human roots for tens of thousands of years. Ice has locked away enormous amounts of water. Winds have carried dust across exposed plains. Forests have retreated into sheltered regions, while cold grasslands have stretched across places that will one day feel mild and green. Now the planet is warming, not gently everywhere, not evenly, not according to a tidy schedule that would make a modern calendar proud. But slowly over generations, the signs are becoming harder to ignore. You walk away from the sleeping shelters and down toward a shallow stream. Its edges are still crusted with ice, but water moves beneath the surface, dark and quick. You kneel and touch it. The cold bites your fingers at once. Pebbles shine through the clear current. On the bank, small green shoots press through damp soil, fragile but stubborn. They look almost too delicate for this world of stone, wind and frost. A mainstream historical fact is that around 11,700 years ago, the climate warmed enough to mark the beginning of the Holocene, the geological epoch in which agriculture settled villages and later civilizations were developed. From where you stand, this future is invisible. No one here is thinking about epochs. No one is saying good news. Everyone, we are entering a more stable interglacial climate. That would be impressive, but perhaps not especially useful while trying to find breakfast. Instead, people notice details. The snow melts earlier in some years. The frozen ground softens for longer. Plants that once struggled now spread into low places near water. Herds alter their routes following new growth. Birds return to nesting grounds. Insects appear in greater numbers during warm months, which is probably not anyone's favourite part of climate improvement. You follow the stream toward a low rise. The grass under your feet is flattened by old frost, but here and there you see willow and birch beginning to claim the land. Their branches are thin, their leaves small, their trunks hardly more than pale fingers reaching upward. Yet they matter. Wood means fuel. Wood means handles for tools, frames for shelters, shafts for spears, and smoke that can carry warmth into a cold evening. In the distance, the great ice still glows under the morning sky. It is not gone. It will not vanish quickly. But it is retreating in many regions, and with every slow withdrawal it changes the land left behind. Meltwater gathers into lakes. Rivers burst from beneath frozen margins. Gravel and clay lie exposed. Valleys opened. New routes appear where ice once blocked movement. The world is becoming more complicated, which is usually how the world behaves when humans are trying to keep up. You hear footsteps behind you. Someone from the group joins you near the rise, carrying a bundle of sticks and a stone blade tucked carefully into a hide wrap. Their clothing is made for usefulness rather than display. Fur turned inward for warmth. Hide softened by scraping. Sinew stitching at the seams. The smell is a mixture of smoke, animal fat, damp leather and cold air. Not exactly a scented candle, but honest lived in, and probably very effective. A quirky lesser-known tidbit is that as Ice Age environments changed, some groups may have used seasonal storage pits or natural cold places to preserve food, especially in regions where reliable returns to the same locations became possible. The idea of keeping food cool was not invented by modern refrigerators humming in kitchens. Long before that, people understood shade, frozen ground, windstone and timing. You continue walking. The land is quiet but not empty. Hair darts between low shrubs. Tracks cross the mud near the stream, some sharp and fresh, others softened by thaw. You see the print of a hoof deep at one edge, where the animal slipped slightly. Nearby, small bird tracks stitch a delicate pattern over wet sand. The earth is becoming readable again after winter, like a page slowly uncovered. Researchers continue to question how quickly different human communities adapted to this warming world. Some evidence suggests people changed their tools, diets, and movements with remarkable flexibility. Other evidence reminds us that climate change could be disruptive, especially when familiar animals declined or landscapes transformed too quickly. Adaptation was not a single clever trick. It was daily attention, shared memory, and the willingness to change what had worked before. The sun rises higher though it remains pale. Its warmth touches your face. You can smell damp ground now, not just frost. That scent, rich and mineral, carries a promise of growth. You hear water dripping from a bank of old snow, drop after drop. A tiny sound, but steady. It is the sound of a planet changing one small edge at a time. Back at camp, people prepare to move. Not far perhaps, not today, but soon. Their lives follow patterns shaped by animals, plants, weather, and memory. In colder times, wide open spaces made long-distance hunting essential in many regions. As warming continues, some landscapes offer more varied foods. Fish in streams, nuts in woodland edges, roots near wetlands, birds, eggs, berries, shellfish, and small game. A person who knows only one way to live may struggle. A person who knows many small ways may survive. You watch as a woman checks a pouch filled with tiny worked stones. A man ties a point to a shaft with sinew, warming the binding near the fire so it tightens as it dries. A child carries a smaller bundle, clearly proud of being useful, and clearly in danger of dropping it. Someone laughs softly. The sound is brief, then folded back into the morning. Today we might glance at a weather app and complain when it changes its mind every 6 minutes. Here, weather is not a notification. It is the shape of the day, the distance you can travel, the food you may find, and whether your shelter must face the wind or hide from it. Climate is not an abstract background. It is the floor beneath every choice. As the group begins to gather its belongings, you look once more toward the ice. It remains immense, silent and cold, but it no longer feels eternal. Beneath the morning light, you can imagine water moving under it, cracks, widening edges, loosening. The old frozen world is not collapsing in one grand moment. It is changing through seasons, through meltwater, through returning plants, through human eyes, noticing that the old paths no longer mean exactly what they used to mean. You step forward with the group as the day opens. The air is still cold, but softer than the night before. Your breath fades in front of you. The stream keeps moving. Somewhere ahead, a bird calls from a young birch, and the sound is small, ordinary, and full of the future. You follow the group toward the place where the land opens wide and the morning grows brighter with every slow step. The air is still cold enough to make your breath visible, but the sharpness has softened. It no longer feels like the world is holding itself rigid against winter. There is movement now, water slipping under ice, mud loosening beneath grass, birds testing the air with thin calls from low branches. Ahead of you, beyond a stretch of wet ground and scattered stone, the ice sheet rises in the distance. It is hard to understand its size at first. Your eyes want to treat it like a mountain, but it is not quite a mountain. It is a moving weight, a frozen country, a mass of ancient snow pressed into blue-white depth. Its surface is uneven, ridged, cracked and shadowed. In places it shines like dull glass. In others it is dirty with dust stones and the remains of earth scraped from far away. To understand this moment you need the larger background. During the last ice age, great ice sheets covered enormous areas of the northern hemisphere. The Laurentide ice sheet spread over much of Canada and parts of the northern United States, while the Scandinavian ice sheet covered northern Europe. These frozen giants were not still. They advanced and retreated over time, carving valleys, grinding rock, and pushing soil like a slow, heavy hand across the land. Now near the end of the Ice Age, they are retreating. Not politely, not smoothly. A glacier is not a tidy guest leaving after dinner. It melts, breaks, floods, stalls, surges, and leaves a remarkable mess behind. You walk through part of that mess now. The ground is uneven underfoot, scattered with stones rounded by ice and water. Low ridges of gravel rise like sleeping animals. Shallow pools reflect the pale sky. Every few steps your foot sinks into soft mud, and the cold damp seeps through the edges of your footwear. A mainstream historical fact is that melting ice sheets released vast amounts of fresh water, raising sea levels and forming huge glacial lakes in many parts of the world. These lakes could be beautiful but also unstable. Some were held back by ice dams which could fail, suddenly sending floods roaring across the landscape. For people living nearby, a familiar valley might become dangerous in a single season. You pause beside a meltwater stream. It rushes faster than the smaller stream you saw earlier, carrying sand silt and small stones. The water is cloudy, pale grey, and bitterly cold. You hear it before you fully see it, a constant hissing rush over gravel. The smell nearby is damp and mineral, with a faint sourness from thawing earth. The bank has collapsed in places, exposing layers of mudstones and old roots. A child from the group crouches near the edge, fascinated by the racing water, until an adult gently pulls them back. Sensible. The stream looks narrow, but it has strength. It comes from ice that has been storing winter upon winter for ages beyond anyone's memory. You look toward the glacier again. The sun has risen enough to reveal dark lines in its face. Cracks melt channels, bands of trapped debris. Here and there, water falls from the ice edge in thin silver threads. The sound reaches you faintly like distant pouring. It is almost peaceful, which is slightly unfair because the same peaceful melting is rewriting the map. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that glaciers can carry enormous boulders for long distances and leave them behind when they melt. These rocks are called glacial erratics. In later ages, people would sometimes wonder why a huge stone sat strangely alone in a field far from any matching bedrock. The answer, rather wonderfully, is that ice delivered it there like the world's slowest and least convenient moving service. You pass one such boulder, now half buried in wet ground. It is taller than a person streaked with lichen cold to the touch. It does not belong to the smaller stones around it. Someone in the group rests a hand on it while adjusting a bundle. Perhaps they know it as a landmark. Perhaps it has a story. In a world without written signs, strange stones, riverbends, hills, and old trees can become memory posts, guiding people through landscapes that keep changing. Researchers still debate how much sudden meltwater affected climate patterns at the end of the Ice Age. Some argue that huge pulses of fresh water entering oceans may have disrupted currents and helped trigger abrupt climate shifts. Others caution that the timing and causes are complicated, varying by region and evidence. The ancient world is generous with clues, but not always with simple answers. You keep walking and the land dips into a broad plain of raw, newly exposed earth. It feels young, almost unfinished. There are no tall forests here yet. Only scattered hardy plants, damp gravel pools of still water, and the long breath of wind moving over open ground. In the distance, a line of birds passes across the sky, dark shapes against pale blue. Their calls fall lightly through the air. The people around you move with care. They know this landscape can shift. A dry path after one winter may become a stream after another. A lake may expand. A river may cut a new channel. The retreating ice opens opportunities, but it also removes old certainties. The map in memory must be revised, and there is no helpful update button. Just elders watching younger hunters exploring, and everyone quietly hoping that the route ahead still leads where it should. You notice how the cold changes near the glacier. Even as the sun touches the plain, the air flowing from the ice carries a deeper chill. It brushes your face and hands, smelling faintly of snowstone and distance. Your cloak shifts in the wind. Somewhere behind you, someone coughs softly. Another person adjusts the strap of a carrying frame wood creaking against hide. Today, when a road floods or a coastline erodes, we may call engineers, check maps, or complain in group chats with great emotional range. Here change must be read directly. A new stream means a new crossing. A vanished herd trail means a longer search. A newly exposed valley might hold fresh grazing fuel stone or danger. Climate change is not a headline. It is mud on your feet and cold water where dry ground used to be. By midday, the group stops on a rise overlooking a great basin. In it lies a lake still partly edged with floating ice. Its surface is dull and silver rippling under the wind. Chunks of ice turn slowly in the water, bumping against one another with hollow knocks. Along the shore, fresh tracks mark where animals have come to drink. The lake did not exist in this form for all of human memory. It is a new feature born from melting. You sit on a flat stone and listen. Water, wind, distant ice. No single sound is loud. Together they fill the air like a low, endless murmur. The world is not ending. It is rearranging itself. And as you watch sunlight move across the glacier's far edge, you begin to understand that the Ice Age did not simply stop. It melted into rivers, lakes, mud, coastlines, forests, and human choices. It left behind stones, stories, paths, and uncertainties. It withdrew slowly enough to be lived through, but powerfully enough to change everything. You rise again with the others stepping carefully around wet ground, while behind you the great ice continues its patient retreat, drop by drop, stream by stream, carrying the old world away in cold shining water. You walk along the edge of the great basin lake, your steps slow and careful, where the ground turns soft underfoot. The surface of the water stretches outward, pale and restless, dotted with drifting ice. Each piece turns lazily, nudged by wind and unseen currents, occasionally brushing against another with a hollow, echoing knock. The sound carries across the open space, low and rhythmic, like distant wood tapping together. Before the Ice Age began to loosen its grip, much of this water did not exist here in this form. It was locked high in glaciers held in frozen silence for thousands of years. Now, as temperatures rise, even if only by a few degrees, the balance shifts. Ice becomes water. Water begins to move. You follow a narrow strip of firmer ground along the lake's edge. The air feels heavier here, tinged with moisture. There is a faint, earthy smell mixed with something mineral, almost metallic. Meltwater carries fine sediment from the glacier, turning streams and lakes cloudy with suspended particles. This gives the water a pale, milky appearance, something scientists today call glacial flour. It makes the lake look almost luminous under certain light, as though it holds its own quiet glow. Over time, rising temperatures led to a steady increase in global sea levels, as water once trapped in ice sheets flowed back into the oceans. You would not see the full effect of that from this inland basin, but the process has already begun. Coastlines far away are slowly shifting. Lands that once connected regions are beginning to narrow. In thousands of years, some will vanish beneath the sea entirely. You pause and crouch near the water's edge. Your fingers hover just above the surface before you dip them in. The cold is immediate and sharp, more intense than the air. It lingers long after you pull your hand away, leaving a tingling numbness that creeps up your skin. This is ancient cold released from ice that formed long before your current moment. Nearby, a few members of the group are examining the shoreline. One person kneels to inspect tracks pressed into the damp ground. The marks are fresh. Hoofed animals, perhaps deer or something similar, have come here recently to drink. Water draws life. Always has, always will. Even as the landscape changes, this simple truth remains reliable. You continue along the shore and the land begins to dip again, giving way to a stretch of low, marshy ground. Thin reeds have started to grow here, their pale green tips swaying gently. Small insects hover above the water, catching the light. Their presence is new compared to the harsher, colder world of earlier generations. Not entirely welcome, perhaps, but a sign of warming all the same. It might surprise you to know that some ancient shorelines from this period now lie far beneath modern seas, preserved in remarkable detail. In certain places, archaeologists have found submerged landscapes with tools, footprints, and even traces of ancient camps. These are the quiet ghosts of a time when the ocean had not yet claimed its current shape. You step onto a slightly higher ridge where the ground feels firmer. From here you can see the basin more clearly. The lake is large but not stable. Its edges are irregular, shaped by melting ice and shifting sediments. In some places it is held back by natural barriers of earth and debris. In others it seems to press outward as though searching for a way to escape. There is a certain tension in that. Not dramatic, not immediate, but present. Water has patience. Given time, it will find its path. Some researchers suggest that sudden releases of glacial lakes may have caused massive floods that reshaped entire regions in very short periods of time. Others caution that while such events did occur, their frequency and scale may have varied more than we once believed. The evidence lies scattered in the land itself, in carved channels, layered sediments and patterns that hint at powerful, fast-moving water. You move down the ridge and rejoin the group as they gather near a cluster of stones. Someone has begun to arrange them in a rough circle, perhaps marking a temporary stopping point. Another person unwraps a bundle revealing dried meat and gathered roots. The smell is faint but familiar. Food simple and practical. You sit with them, feeling the ground beneath you still cool but no longer frozen solid. It gives slightly under your weight. A small sign, but meaningful. In colder times, the earth would remain hard for longer, resisting change. Now it softens, earlier opens sooner, allows plants to take hold more easily. Today we might measure climate change with satellites, data models, and long graphs that stretch across screens. Here, change is measured in whether the ground can be dug, whether plants grow sooner, whether animals return or disappear. It is immediate, personal, and impossible to ignore. A light breeze moves across the lake, carrying with it the scent of water and distant ice. It brushes against your face, cool but not biting. The sun has climbed higher now, casting longer reflections across the rippling surface. For a moment, everything feels still. And yet nothing here is truly still. The water is rising, the ice is shrinking, the land is adjusting. Even the people sitting quietly beside you are part of that movement. Their choices, their paths, their knowledge will shape how they move through this changing world. You look once more across the lake, watching a piece of ice drift slowly toward the far shore. It turns gently, catching the light, then fades into the distance. What was once solid and unmoving is now fluid, shifting, uncertain. And as you sit there, listening to the quiet sounds of water and wind, you begin to sense something deeper. Not an ending, but a transition. You leave the damp edge of the basin behind and follow the group inland, where the ground rises gently and the air feels a little drier. The wind carries a different scent here, less of cold water and more of soil, faintly sweet, faintly alive. It is subtle, but once you notice it, you cannot quite ignore it. Something is growing. At first the land still feels open. Wide stretches of grass ripple in the breeze, their dry blades whispering against one another. The colours are muted pale golds and soft browns, but scattered among them are hints of green. Small shrubs appear more frequently now, low to the ground but stubborn. You step carefully around them, noticing how their roots grip the soil, holding it together where melting once left it loose. Before this warming period, large parts of the northern world were dominated by cold steppe and tundra landscapes that favoured hardy grasses and low vegetation. Trees struggled in many regions, limited by long winters and short growing seasons. But as temperatures slowly rise, even by a small margin, it changes what can survive. You walk a little farther and then you see it clearly. A line of trees. Not a dense forest, not yet, but unmistakable. Thin trunks, pale bark, small leaves trembling in the light. Birch, most likely. They stand in a loose cluster, spaced apart, their branches reaching upward as though testing the air. The sight feels almost quiet in its importance, like a whisper that carries weight. The group slows slightly as they approach. Trees mean many things: shelter from wind, material for tools, fuel that burns longer and hotter than scattered brush. But trees also mean change. Where trees grow, the land behaves differently. Animals shift their patterns. Light changes. Visibility narrows. Sounds carry in new ways. You step closer and place your hand against one of the trunks. The bark is smooth in places, peeling slightly in thin curls. It feels cool but not frozen, alive in its own quiet way. As the Ice Age waned, forest gradually expanded into areas that had long been too cold. Pollen records preserved in lake sediments show this transition clearly, layer by layer, revealing the spread of species like birch and pine into newly hospitable regions. It is one of the ways modern scientists reconstruct ancient landscapes, reading the past through grains too small to see without magnification. A soft rustling sound draws your attention. Something moves between the trees, not large, not heavy. A small animal, perhaps slipping through undergrowth, that would not have existed here generations earlier. The forest edge offers new hiding places, new food sources, new risks. You notice the ground beneath the trees feels different too. Softer, cushioned by fallen leaves and organic matter beginning to build. It holds moisture in a different way, not as exposed as the open plain. When you step, it gives slightly, then settles. A lesser-known detail is that early forest expansion also changed fire patterns across landscapes. With more vegetation came more fuel, and in some regions natural fires may have become more frequent or behaved differently than in the open steppe. Fire, like everything else here, responds to the slow shift in climate. The group begins to move through the scattered trees, weaving between trunks, adjusting their pace. Visibility is reduced now. You cannot see as far ahead as before. The wide horizon has narrowed into a series of smaller views, each framed by branches and leaves. You hear different sounds here. The wind no longer sweeps freely across open ground. Instead, it moves through leaves with a softer, layered murmur. Birds call from above, their voices sharper in the enclosed space. Somewhere a branch creaks faintly. You might find yourself wondering how people feel about this change. Open plains offer visibility. You can see animals from a distance. You can track movement across wide spaces. Forests, on the other hand, offer concealment, but also uncertainty. You cannot always see what is coming. You rely more on sound, on signs, on memory of paths between trees. Some experts propose that expanding forests pushed certain large grazing animals into new territories or reduced their preferred habitats. Others suggest that human hunting played a stronger role in shaping animal populations during this time. The truth may lie somewhere in between, a complex interaction of environment and human activity that still invites discussion. You pause near a fallen branch. Someone in the group picks it up, testing its weight, then breaks it cleanly against a stone. The sound is sharp but brief. The wood is dry enough to use but not brittle. It will burn well. Nearby, another person examines the ground, digging lightly with a pointed stick. Beneath the surface, the soil is darker, richer. They uncover a small root, brush it clean, and set it aside. Food hidden just below sight. Today, if we want wood or food, we might visit a store or tap a screen, barely thinking about the source. Here, every material is noticed, tested, understood. The forest is not just scenery. It is a resource, a challenge, a system to be learned. You move deeper into the trees and the light shifts again. It becomes softer, filtered through leaves. Shadows break into patterns across the ground. The air feels stiller, warmer in small pockets where sunlight gathers. It is not a dramatic transformation, not yet, but it is steady. The Ice Age landscape is giving way piece by piece to something more varied. Grasslands remain, but forests begin to claim their place. Rivers run freer, soil develops, life diversifies. You stop for a moment and look back the way you came. Through the thin line of trees you can still see the open plain, and far beyond it the faint glow of distant ice. Two worlds overlapping, one fading, one emerging, and you are walking directly between them. The group continues forward, stepping quietly over roots and fallen branches, their path not marked by roads, but by memory and observation. You follow, listening to the new sounds, breathing in the changing air, feeling the ground shift beneath your steps. The forest does not rush. It arrives slowly, but once it begins, it rarely turns back. You move through the young forest until the trees begin to thin again, opening onto a broad stretch of grassland where the light feels wider and colder. The change is gentle but immediate. The soft leaf murmur fades behind you, replaced by wind moving over low plants and dry stems. The world ahead is open enough to see far, and in the distance small dark shapes move slowly across the pale ground. Animals. The group becomes quieter at once. Not tense exactly, not in the dramatic way stories like to imagine, but attentive. Everyone seems to shift into a more careful rhythm. A foot placed more softly. A bundle adjusted without rattling. A child guided behind an adult with a light touch on the shoulder. The landscape itself seems to listen. To understand this moment, you need to remember that the end of the Ice Age did not only change temperature, it changed the living map. Plants moved into new areas, and animals followed plants, weather, water, and one another. Some species thrived in open, cold grasslands. Others preferred woodland edges, wetlands, or warmer valleys. As the climate shifted, the animals people depended on did not simply stay put out of politeness. They moved. Ahead, the dark shapes become clearer. A small herd grazes near a shallow dip where water has gathered. They lower their heads, lift them, turn slightly, then graze again. Their coats are thick, their movements deliberate. Perhaps they're reindeer or another cold-adapted herd animal still common in this changing world. Farther off you see heavier bodies moving with slow strength. Bison, perhaps. The exact species depends on where in the world your path has placed you, but the pattern is familiar. Animals are searching for the right balance of food safety and season. One well-established fact from this period is that many animal ranges shifted as the climate warmed after the last glacial maximum. Reindeer horses, bison, elk, deer, and other animals adjusted their territories as vegetation changed. For human groups, these shifts mattered deeply. A herd route was not just an interesting nature fact. It could mean food, clothing tools, and survival through winter. You crouch with the others behind a low rise. The grass brushes your hands. It is cool and slightly damp near the roots, dry at the tips. The smell is earthy, mixed with the faint musk of animals carried on the wind. Someone beside you studies the herd not with excitement, but with patient calculation. Which way is the wind blowing? Are there young animals? Are there signs of sickness? Is the ground suitable for approach? Nothing about this is casual. A bird rises suddenly from the grass, fluttering upward with a burst of wings. Everyone freezes for a breath. The herd lifts its heads. For a moment the world holds still, then the animals settle again, and the quiet returns. You almost want to apologize to everyone on behalf of the bird, though. To be fair, it is just trying to have a morning. There's a small curious detail in the record of Ice Age and post-Ice Age life. In some regions, people may have used natural landscape features such as cliffs, marshes, narrow valleys, or snowbanks to guide or trap animals during hunts. Not every hunt was a wild chase across open ground. Often success came from planning patience and using the land itself as a silent partner. The group does not rush. They watch. You watch with them. The herd begins to drift slowly toward a patch of greener growth near the water. A young animal lags behind, then trots forward to rejoin the others. Its hooves make faint, dull sounds on damp earth. The wind shifts slightly, bringing the smell of wet fur and churned mud. Climate change is written in these movements. A colder, drier world favoured vast open grazing lands in many areas. As forests spread, some open habitats shrank or shifted. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and other great animals had lived in ecosystems sometimes called the mammoth steppe. A wide, cold, grassy environment, rich in herbs and grasses. As conditions changed, that world became harder to maintain in many places. Researchers continue to disagree on why many large Ice Age animals disappeared near the end of the Pleistocene. Some emphasize climate change and habitat loss. Others point to human hunting pressure. Many now consider that both forces may have worked together with different causes, carrying different weight in different regions. It is not a neat story, which is inconvenient for simple explanations, but rather typical of real history. You rise slowly as the group decides not to pursue this herd today. Perhaps the wind is wrong. Perhaps the animals are too alert. Perhaps the group has other food and risking injury would be foolish. In a world without hospitals, being sensible is not boring. It is a survival strategy. The path turns toward a line of low shrubs where tracks cross the mud. You kneel to look. Hoof prints overlap with smaller paw marks. Droppings lie nearby, dry at the edges. Someone touches the print lightly and gestures toward the west. No words are needed for you to understand that animals have passed recently. You follow the trail for a while. The ground rises and falls in quiet waves. In one patch, the grass has been cropped short. In another, a clump of shrubs has been rubbed and broken perhaps by antlers or heavy bodies passing through. Every sign is part of a conversation between animals, land, and people. You hear a deeper sound from far away, a low rumble carried by wind. It might be bison, it might be something larger. You cannot see the source, only the open land stretching beneath the pale sky. The sound fades, leaving behind the hiss of grass. Today, many of us meet animals through screens, pets, farms, or the occasional bold pigeon with no respect for personal space. Here, animals are neighbours, food sources, dangers, weather signs, and spiritual presences all at once. Their bones become tools. Their hides become clothing. Their movements shape human travel. Their disappearance can change a whole way of life. As afternoon settles, you reach a place where forest, wetland, and open grassland meet. It is rich with signs. Bird calls rise from reeds. Tracks crowd the muddy shore. Small fish flicker in shallow water. A deer steps briefly from the trees, sees the group, and vanishes with a soft crash through branches. This is the new world forming around you, not one landscape replacing another completely, but many habitats braided together. For people who can learn its patterns, it offers variety. For those who depend too closely on a fading way, it brings uncertainty. You sit near the wetland edge as the group rests. The air smells of mud water, crushed grass, and distant smoke from a small fire being started behind you. In the fading light, insects hover above the reeds, and birds call from hidden places. Animals are moving. Humans are watching. And beneath all of it, the warming earth is quietly redrawing the paths that every living creature must follow. You remain near the edge of the wetland as the light begins to soften toward evening. The air cools gently and a faint mist starts to gather just above the water, drifting low and slow like a quiet breath rising from the earth. Behind you, the group has settled into a small resting place. A fire has been coaxed into life again, its glow steady and low, not meant to be seen from far away. The landscape around you feels richer than the open plains you crossed earlier. There is more to notice, more to gather, more to think about, and with that, more decisions. As the Ice Age draws to a close, human communities are beginning to adjust in ways that are subtle but deeply important. For thousands of years, many groups depended heavily on large animals for survival. Mammoths, bison, reindeer, and others provided meat, fat, bone, and hide. Entire seasonal movements were shaped around following herds across vast distances. But now things are shifting. You watch as one member of the group carefully checks a set of small traps placed near the water's edge. They are simple, made from bent branches and cordage, but effective. One of them holds a small animal, likely a hare. It is handled quickly, respectfully, without unnecessary struggle. Food secured without the need for a long pursuit. This is part of a broader change taking place across many regions. As large game becomes less predictable or less abundant in certain areas, people begin to widen their diets. Fish birds, small mammals, shellfish, roots, seeds and nuts all become more important. Survival becomes less about one big success and more about many small reliable ones. You move closer to the fire. The smell of cooking rises slowly, warm and familiar. Meat roasts over low flames. Nearby, someone crushes seeds between stones, creating a coarse paste. The sound is soft, rhythmic, almost soothing. Archaeological evidence shows that toward the end of the Ice Age, many human groups began using a broader range of food sources. A shift sometimes described as a broad-spectrum revolution. It does not mean people suddenly forgot how to hunt large animals. It means they became more flexible, more varied in their approach to food. You sit down on a flat piece of ground, feeling the warmth of the fire reach your hands. Your back remains cool, the evening air settling gently around you. Sparks drift upward, disappearing into the dimming sky. A small detail often overlooked is how much skill goes into gathering. Hunting large animals may seem dramatic, but gathering plants, seeds and roots requires deep knowledge. Which plants are edible, which are poisonous, when they are ready, how to prepare them. Mistakes are not easily forgiven. Knowledge must be passed carefully, often through quiet demonstration rather than words. You notice a child watching closely as an older member of the group prepares a bundle of roots. The outer layer is peeled away, revealing the edible portion beneath. The child leans forward slightly, eyes fixed, absorbing the process. This is how learning happens here. Slowly, repeatedly, without written instructions or diagrams. You might think about how today we can look up nearly any recipe in seconds often, while standing in a kitchen with more tools than anyone here could imagine. And yet the basic act remains the same. Preparing food, sharing it, passing knowledge from one person to another. The group eats quietly. There's no rush, but also no lingering waste. Food is valued, but not in a ceremonial way every time. It is part of life as ordinary and as essential as breathing. You hear a soft sound nearby. Turning your head, you see movement at the edge of the firelight. A small animal, cautious but curious, pauses just beyond the glow. It watches for a moment, then slips back into the darkness. The boundary between human space and animal space is thin here, shifting constantly. Some researchers suggest that this period of dietary expansion may have laid the groundwork for later developments like agriculture. Others believe it was simply a flexible response to changing environments, not necessarily a step toward farming. As with many things in deep history, the connections are complex and not always direct. You stretch your hands closer to the fire. The heat feels stronger now as the air cools. The smell of smoke clings to your clothing, settling into the fibres. It is a scent that follows people everywhere in this time, woven into daily life. Tools lie nearby, some larger, some surprisingly small. You pick up a tiny stone blade no longer than your thumb. It is sharp, carefully shaped and fitted into a wooden handle. These smaller tools, often called microliths in modern terms, are part of the evolving toolkit of human groups adapting to new conditions. They are lighter, more precise and useful for a wider range of tasks. The fire crackles softly. Someone adds another piece of wood, adjusting it with practiced ease. The flames shift, casting moving shadows across faces and hands. You feel the quiet rhythm of the group settling in for the night. There is no clear boundary between work and rest. Tasks fade into stillness. Conversation, if there is any, remains low and brief. The day has been long and tomorrow will require the same steady attention. Above you the sky deepens into night. Stars appear one by one, then in clusters until the entire sky seems filled with them. Without artificial light, the stars feel closer, brighter, almost overwhelming in their number. You lean back slightly, looking upward. For a moment, everything feels calm. The shifting climate, the changing animals, the uncertain future all fade into the background. There is only the fire, the quiet breathing of those around you, and the vast sky above. But even in this stillness, change continues. The warming world is asking new questions of the people who live in it, and slowly, carefully, they are beginning to answer. You sit close to the fire as the night settles more fully around you, the warmth pressing gently against your hands while your back cools in the open air. The flames move slowly, rising and folding inward, their light steady and low. No one here wastes fuel on large, dramatic fires. Everything is measured, quiet, intentional. Before sleep comes, there is always this in-between time. A moment to repair, to share, to think. You notice how the group gathers not in a tight circle, but in a loose arrangement, each person angled slightly toward the heat while still keeping space. Tools are brought out again. A spear shaft is checked for cracks. A binding is tightened with careful fingers. A hide is rubbed and softened, the repetitive motion slow and almost hypnotic. In a world shaped by constant movement, evenings like this matter. They are not only about rest, they are about maintaining the small things that keep life running. A dull blade, a loose binding, a torn cloak, any of these could become serious problems out on the land. You shift slightly, listening to the subtle sounds around you. The fire gives a soft crack. Someone breathes out slowly. In the distance, an animal calls once then again farther away. The sound fades into the night. As the Ice Age recedes, these quiet gatherings begin to take on a slightly different rhythm in some places. With more varied food sources and landscapes offering seasonal stability, groups may spend longer periods in certain areas than before. Not permanently settled, not yet, but less constantly on the move. You notice this in the way things are arranged. Some items seem to have been placed with the expectation of returning. A cluster of stones near the fire blackened from repeated use. A shallow pit where ashes have built up over time. A nearby tree with branches cut in a way that suggests familiarity, not a one-time visit. Evidence from archaeological sites shows that some late Ice Age camps were used repeatedly over seasons or years. These were not full villages, but they were known places revisited and remembered. The idea of home, even if temporary, begins to gather weight. A soft murmur of voices rises and falls beside you. You cannot make out the words, but the tone is calm, almost reflective. Someone gestures lightly with a hand, tracing something in the air, perhaps recalling a route to hunt, a place where food was found. Knowledge passes not in lectures but in these quiet exchanges. There is a small detail you might not expect. In some Ice Age sites, archaeologists have found carefully arranged hearths, sometimes with stones placed in deliberate patterns. This suggests that even in mobile camps, people paid attention to how space was organized, how heat was managed, how the fire served not just as warmth but as a center. You look at the fire again. It is more than a source of heat. It is light protection, a place to cook, a place to gather. It pushes back the darkness just enough to make the night feel manageable. You might wonder how people felt about the changing world during moments like this. Did they sense that something larger was shifting? Or did each change feel small, absorbed into daily life without the need for big conclusions? Some researchers believe that people adapted so gradually to post-Ice Age changes that there was no single moment of realization. Others suggest that sudden events like floods or cold snaps may have made the changes feel more dramatic at times. The truth likely depends on where you stand, which season you live through, and what you lose or gain along the way. You stretch your legs slightly, feeling the ground beneath you. It's cool but not frozen. The soil holds a softness that would not have been there in deeper glacial times. Small roots press against your palm as you rest your hand on the earth. Life is working quietly below the surface. Nearby a bundle is opened, revealing small objects wrapped in hide. Inside are pieces of stone bone and perhaps something more personal, a carved shape worn smooth by handling. It is passed briefly from one person to another, then returned to its wrapping. Objects like these may carry meaning beyond their use, memory, identity, connection. You think about how today we keep photographs, messages, objects that remind us of people and places. Here, memory lives in stories, in repeated actions, in the careful keeping of things that matter. The fire burns lower, someone adjusts it, adding just enough fuel to keep it alive through the night. The glow softens, becoming deeper, more orange than bright. A faint wind moves through the camp, stirring the edges of hides and carrying the scent of smoke outward. It brushes your face cool and gentle. Above the stars remain steady, their light unchanged by the slow transformations below. You feel a quiet shift in the group. Movements become slower. Conversations fade. One by one, people settle into rest, wrapping themselves in hides, turning slightly toward the remaining warmth. You lie back as well, looking up at the sky through the faint outline of branches overhead. The ground holds a trace of the day's warmth, but it is fading. The fire's heat reaches you in soft pulses. This moment, simple and quiet, is part of the larger change unfolding across the world. Less constant movement in some places, more return to familiar ground, or time spent in one location, even if only for a season. It is not yet the world of villages or farms, but it is moving gently in that direction. You close your eyes, briefly listening. The fire breathes. The wind passes. The land settles, and somewhere beyond the darkness, the ice continues to melt, slowly shaping the paths that tomorrow will follow. You wake in the deep part of the night, not suddenly, not with alarm, but with the quiet awareness that something has shifted. The fire has burned lower, its glow now a soft red pulse beneath a thin layer of ash. The air feels colder than before, slipping through the edges of your covering and brushing against your face with a sharper edge. For a moment, everything seems still. Then you notice it. The wind has changed. It moves differently now, carrying a colder scent, one that reminds you of earlier days of harder frost, of a world less softened by warmth. You pull your covering closer, listening as the breeze passes through the sparse trees with a faint, dry whisper. This is not just a passing chill. It is part of something larger. The period you're living through is not a smooth transition from cold to warm. Instead, it includes interruptions, sudden returns to colder conditions that disrupt the slow warming trend. One of the most well-known of these events is what modern researchers call the Younger Dryas, a period when temperatures dropped again quite abruptly after initial warming had already begun. You sit up slightly, looking toward the horizon. The darkness hides most of the landscape, but you can feel the difference. The ground beneath you seems firmer than it did the evening before. The air bites a little harder in your lungs. You might wonder how people experience this kind of shift. One season feels warmer, more promising. Then, without warning, the cold returns. Not as severe as the peak of the Ice Age, perhaps, but enough to matter. Enough to change plans. Enough to challenge survival. Evidence from ice cores, especially those taken from Greenland, shows that temperatures during the Younger Dryas dropped sharply and remained cooler for over 1,000 years before warming resumed again. These changes happened quickly on a geological timescale, sometimes within decades. For the people living through them, it would have felt like a sudden reversal. You stand and step away from the resting group, your feet pressing into ground that feels slightly harder now, as if the night has tightened its grip. The sky's clear, the stars bright and steady. There is no visible sign of the change, only the feeling of it. A faint crunch sounds underfoot where a thin layer of frost has formed again. Nearby someone else stirs, pulling their covering closer. Another person adjusts the fire, adding a small piece of fuel, coaxing the embers back into a low flame. The group responds without panic, without confusion. Cold is not unfamiliar. It is part of life here. But this return, this lingering chill, carries a quiet tension. You move toward the edge of the camp and look out over the land. In the dim light, you can just make out the outline of the wetland you passed earlier. A thin layer of ice has formed along its edges, again catching what little light there is. It is a reminder. The warming is not guaranteed. Not yet. There is an interesting detail in the plant record from this time. Pollen samples show a sudden increase in a flower called Dryas, a small hardy plant that thrives in cold conditions. Its return to prominence is what gave the Younger Dryas its name. A tiny flower quietly marking a major shift in climate. You crouch and touch the ground again. It's firmer now, the softness of the previous day pulled back slightly by the cold. The soil holds less give beneath your fingers. This kind of change would not go unnoticed by the people here. Shorter growing seasons, animals altering their movements again, water freezing where it had begun to flow more freely. Each of these shifts adds pressure requiring adjustment. Some researchers believe that sudden climate events like this may have pushed human groups to become even more flexible, encouraging innovation and new strategies for survival. Others suggest that such disruptions could have caused hardship, forcing groups to compete or change their ways in difficult conditions. You stand and look back toward the fire. Its glow has strengthened slightly, casting longer shadows across the ground. People are beginning to stir again, reacting to the cold, not with alarm but with practiced routine. The covering is pulled tighter. A fire is fed. A tool is checked. Life continues. You return to the warmth, kneeling beside the fire and extending your hands toward it. The heat feels stronger against the colder air, more noticeable, more necessary. Smoke rises slowly, curling upward before disappearing into the dark. You think about how today a sudden drop in temperature might be announced through alerts, forecast warnings. Here the announcement is the air itself, the ground, the water, the behavior of animals. No explanation, only experience. The sky begins to lighten slightly at the edge of the horizon, a faint grey line signalling the approach of morning. The cold lingers, but it begins to loosen its hold as the first hint of daylight returns. This moment, this chill, is part of a larger story. The end of the Ice Age is not a straight path. It bends. It pauses. It reverses briefly, and then slowly it moves forward again. You watch as the group begins to prepare for the day, their movement steady despite the colder air. They will adapt as they always have, adjusting routes, food sources, timing. The world may shift unexpectedly, but they are not still. They move with it. You rise with the pale light of morning, the cold still lingering in the air like a quiet reminder of the night's shift. The ground beneath your feet feels firmer than it did before, and the thin sheen of frost along the edges of the wetland glints faintly as the first light touches it. The warmth that had begun to settle over this land has not vanished, but it has clearly been interrupted. The group moves with a slightly different energy today. Not anxious, not hurried, but attentive in a deeper way. Small changes matter here. A colder morning means different decisions. Where to walk, what to expect, what might no longer be where it once was. To understand how we know about these ancient shifts, you have to step briefly into the quiet work of modern science. Long after this moment, people would drill deep into the ice sheets that still exist in places like Greenland and Antarctica. Layer by layer, those ice cores hold tiny records of past climates, trapped bubbles of air dust and chemical traces that reveal temperature changes over time. These frozen records show that the transition out of the Ice Age was not smooth. Instead, it included sudden changes like the cooling you felt during the night. These shifts could happen over surprisingly short periods, sometimes within the span of a human lifetime. You walk away from the camp again, drawn toward a low ridge that overlooks the land you crossed yesterday. The basin lake is still there, its surface calmer now in the morning light. But the edges look slightly different. The thin ice along the shore suggests that the night's chill reached even here. You kneel and touch the ground once more. It holds the memory of both warmth and cold, soft beneath the surface but tightened above, a layered feeling like the climate itself. There is something quietly fascinating about how scientists piece together this distant past. Tiny grains of pollen preserved in lake beds reveal which plants were growing at different times. Layers of sediment show floods, droughts, and shifts in water flow. Even the shells of small creatures can hint at changes in temperature and environment. It is a slow, careful kind of detective work. Not dramatic, not loud, but deeply revealing. You stand again and look across the landscape. The young trees you passed before seem unchanged at first glance, but you know now that even they respond to these shifts. A colder season can slow their growth. A sudden frost can damage new leaves. Over time, these small effects shape where forests can spread and where they struggle. Nearby, one of the group members examines a plant closely brushing frost from its leaves. They do not need scientific instruments to notice change. Their knowledge comes from observation, from memory, from experience passed through generations. A small but intriguing detail is that some ancient climate changes left marks not only in natural records, but also in human behaviour. Archaeological sites from this period sometimes show shifts in tool types, settlement patterns, and food remains that align with environmental changes. It is as if the land and the people are writing parallel stories, each reflecting the other. You begin to walk along the ridge, the ground crunching softly under your feet where frost has formed. The sound is delicate, almost crisp, breaking the quiet of the morning. Below, the wetland shows signs of life despite the chill. Birds move cautiously along the edges and small ripples disturb the water where something stirs beneath the surface. The world has not stopped, it has adjusted. You might think about how today we rely on long-term data charts and predictions to understand climate. Here, understanding comes from watching patterns over time, remembering how the land behaved last season, noticing what is different this year. It is a slower form of knowledge, but no less accurate in its own way. Some experts suggest that abrupt climate events like the Younger Dryas, may have been triggered by disruptions in ocean circulation, possibly caused by large amounts of fresh water entering the oceans from melting ice. Others point to different mechanisms emphasizing the complexity of the system. Even now, with all our tools and data, the exact causes are still being explored. You pause at the top of the ridge, taking in the full view. The forest edge behind you, the open grassland ahead, the wetland below, the distant fading presence of ice, all of it connected, all of it shifting. You feel the wind again, still carrying that cooler edge, though softened now by the rising sun. It moves across your face through your clothing over the land itself. Back at the camp, people continue their quiet preparations. The day will move forward regardless of the night's chill. Paths will be chosen, food will be gathered, tools will be used. Life does not wait for perfect conditions. It adapts. You turn and begin to walk back toward the group, your steps steady, your mind holding the quiet awareness that this world is more dynamic than it first appeared. Not simply warming, not simply cooling, but shifting in pulses and patterns that are only now beginning to be understood. And as you return to the warmth of the fire, the cold morning air slowly giving way to the day, you carry with you a deeper sense of what it means to live at the edge of a changing world. A world that does not move in straight lines, but in quiet, powerful turns. You leave the ridge as the morning brightens, following the others across a stretch of open ground where the wind moves low and steady through the grass. The cold from the night has not fully gone, but sunlight is beginning to soften its edges. Frost loosens from stems. Drops of water cling to the tips of leaves. The earth smells damp again with that deep mineral scent of thawing soil. Today the group moves with purpose. Not toward a forest, not toward a stream, but toward tracks. They begin as scattered marks in the mud near the wetland, then grow clearer where the ground stays soft. Large round impressions, deep pressure at the front, a drag mark here and there where a heavy foot has shifted through wet earth. You know even before anyone gestures that these are not the tracks of deer or reindeer. Something much larger has passed this way. The world at the end of the Ice Age is still home to animals that would seem almost dreamlike to modern eyes. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths in the Americas, woolly rhinoceroses in parts of Eurasia, enormous deer with sweeping antlers, powerful cats, great bears and other large animals still move through parts of the earth. They belong to ecosystems that are beginning to change around them. You follow the tracks slowly. The people ahead read the ground with careful attention. The impressions are not perfectly fresh, but not old either. Rain has softened their edges and a few have begun to collapse. Nearby broken shrubs show where a large body brushed past. A clump of grass has been torn up by the roots. A reliable piece of scientific evidence is that many large animals, often called megafauna, declined or disappeared near the end of the Pleistocene, roughly around the same broad period as the end of the Ice Age. The timing varied across regions. Some vanished earlier. Some survived longer in isolated places. But overall, the world was losing many of its giants. You step over a shallow pool formed inside one of the huge prints. The water reflects the sky, pale and still. It is strange to see something so small resting inside the mark of something so powerful. A tiny mirror held in the footprint of a vanishing world. The group pauses near a stand of low trees. Someone touches the bark where it has been rubbed smooth. Another person examines a pile of dung, partly dried, partly softened by damp air. Nothing is wasted as evidence. Every sign has meaning. A curious detail from later discoveries is that some mammoth bones show signs of human use far beyond food. People shaped bones into tools, built shelter frames from large bones in some regions, and may have used tusks in remarkable ways. A mammoth was not only meat, it was material memory, and perhaps a presence with meaning that reached beyond ordinary survival. You imagine the animal that made these tracks, a mammoth moving through mist, its long hair damp from morning air, tusks curving outward, trunk sweeping close to the ground. It moves slowly but with immense strength. Each step presses history into mud. Around it, the world is becoming less suited to the old cold grasslands it once knew so well. The land changes quietly. Forests expand, wetlands spread in places, grasslands shrink or shift, snow patterns alter, plants that fed large grazers become less abundant in some regions. Hunting pressures may also grow as human groups become more widespread and skilled. None of these forces needs to act alone. Together they can press hard on animals already adapting to a changing climate. Interpretations differ over what mattered most in the extinction of Ice Age megafauna. In some regions, climate and habitat change seem especially important. In others, human hunting may have played a major role. Many specialists now look at the question as a combination of pressures, where warming climates altered vegetation and human activity overlapped in different ways from place to place. You keep walking and the tracks lead toward a low valley. There the ground opens into a damp meadow. The air smells of wet grass, animal musk, and cold water. Birds rise suddenly from the reeds, beating their wings with soft urgency. The group stops at the edge, scanning the valley. For a long moment you see nothing. Then far across the meadow a dark shape moves between thin trees. Large, slow, almost silent. The group lowers itself at once. You crouch with them, feeling wet grass press through your clothing. No one speaks. Even the children understand the stillness. The animal is far away, partly hidden by the mist and branches, but its size changes the whole feeling of the valley. It is like seeing a piece of the old world still breathing. There is no rush to hunt. The animal is distant and perhaps not worth the risk. Large animals can feed a group, but they can also injure or kill. People here are skilled, not reckless. Survival often favours patience over bravery, which is admittedly less glamorous but much better for reaching old age. The mammoth, if that is what it is, shifts, slowly pulling at vegetation near the edge of the meadow. It raises its head ears, moving slightly, then turns away. For a moment its outline is clearer. Heavy shoulders, long hair, a trunk reaching down. Then it passes behind the trees and the mist takes it. You remain crouched even after it disappears. Something about the moment feels solemn, not because anyone here knows this species may one day vanish. They do not. To them, the great animal is still part of the world, dangerous and useful and known through stories, trails and bones. But you, standing with a memory of the future, feel the quiet weight of it. Today we often imagine extinction as a sudden event, a final animal, a final breath, neat closing line. In reality, it is usually slower and more uneven. A species disappears from one valley, then another. It remains in a distant place for generations. Stories outlive sightings, bones remain after memory thins. The group rises slowly. The decision is made without ceremony. They will not follow farther. Perhaps the animal is alone. Perhaps the ground is poor. Perhaps they have enough food for now. The tracks are studied once more, then left behind. You turn away from the meadow, but you glance back before the trees hide it. The mist still hangs low. The reeds move gently. Somewhere beyond sight, the great animal continues on its path, unaware that the age it belongs to is fading. As you walk with the group, the ground changes beneath your feet again, from wet meadow to firmer soil, from open grass to scattered brush. Each step carries you deeper into a world where old patterns are loosening. The giants are not gone yet, but their paths are narrowing, and in the soft mud behind you their footprints slowly fill with water, reflecting a sky that is already becoming new. You leave the meadow behind and walk into a lower, greener place where the land gathers moisture in quiet pockets. The air changes first. It feels softer against your skin, less exposed than the windy plain, and it smells of mud, crushed leaves, wet bark, and faintly sweet plant growth. Underfoot, the ground is uneven, patched with roots, moss, and dark soil that clings to your steps. The group slows here, not because the way is difficult, but because this place offers food. Not the grand heavy food of mammoth or bison. Smaller things. Many things. You notice hands reaching toward plants with practiced care. A woman bends near a cluster of roots, loosening the earth with a sharpened digging stick. Another person gathers seeds from tall grasses, cupping them into a hide pouch. Someone else checks the edge of a shallow pool where fish flicker in the brown-green water. Nothing looks dramatic. No heroic chase. No thunder of hooves. Just careful attention repeated again and again. This is one of the quiet revolutions of the changing world. As forests, wetlands, rivers, and coastal zones expand after the Ice Age, people, in many regions, begin relying on a wider range of foods. They still hunt, of course. Hunting remains important, but meals increasingly come from many sources gathered across the day and season. Archaeologists often describe this as a broadening of the human diet near the end of the Pleistocene and into the early Holocene. It included more fish, shellfish, birds, small mammals, nuts, seeds, tubers, and fruits where these were available. It was not a universal recipe, because environments differed widely, but the general pattern appears in many places. You kneel beside the person digging roots. The stick presses into the soil with a soft, wet sound. The root comes free, slowly coated in dark earth. It is wiped clean on a patch of grass, inspected, and added to a bundle. The process is calm but exact. The wrong plant can make a person sick. The right one can help carry a family through a lean season. A small detail worth knowing is that some of the earliest grinding stones show heavy wear from processing seeds and plant foods. This means people were not simply grabbing plants casually. They were preparing them, crushing them, soaking them, roasting them, and making them easier to eat. In other words, prehistoric cooking could involve a lot of patient prep work, which feels unfairly familiar if you have ever chopped vegetables while already tired. You follow the group toward a stream where the water runs clearer than the glacier-fed lakes behind you. It slips over stones with a gentle chatter. Along the bank, the mud holds tiny tracks from birds and small animals. A fish flashes silver near the surface, then disappears beneath the shadow of overhanging grass. Someone has placed a simple woven trap in the shallows. It is made from flexible branches narrowed in such a way that fish can enter more easily than they can leave. When it is lifted, water pours through the gap, sparkling in the light. Inside, two small fish twist and glimmer. They are removed quickly and carried back toward the fire. You sit near the bank listening to the stream. The sound is steady and restful, a soft liquid voice moving over stone. The air is cool but not harsh. Sunlight breaks through the young trees in pale patches. Insects hover above the water and birds call from the reeds with bright short notes. Food here is seasonal. That matters. Berries ripen only at certain times. Nuts fall when trees decide which is to say, with no concern for anyone's schedule. Fish runs come and go. Birds nest, migrate, vanish. Roots store energy underground, but only if you know when and where to look. The people around you are not wandering at random. They are following a calendar written in plants, animals, weather, and memory. Some specialists have proposed that this deeper knowledge of seasonal plant foods helped prepare the way for later cultivation. Others are more cautious, pointing out that gathering wild foods does not automatically lead to farming. People can be excellent foragers for thousands of years without deciding to plant fields. History, as usual, refuses to behave like a straight staircase. You watch as gathered seeds are poured onto a flat stone. Another stone presses down and moves in a slow circular rhythm. The sound is rough and gentle at the same time, grain against stone against stone. A child reaches forward to help, but the adult guides their hand, carefully showing the right pressure, the right movement. Too hard and the seeds scatter. Too soft and nothing happens. The smell of roasting fish soon drifts from the fire. It mixes with smoke and damp leaves, warm and savoury. Someone places roots near the edge of the coals, not directly in the flame, letting heat soften them gradually. The skins darken and split. Steam rises when one is opened. You take in the scene and realise how different this meal feels from the image many people carry of Ice Age life. It is not only spears and giant animals, it is baskets digging sticks, grinding stones, traps patience and taste. It is people noticing that a certain nut keeps well through winter, or that a shellfish bed can feed many hands, or that a seed becomes better after grinding and heating. Today we might call this food security, diet diversity, or resource management, and then possibly put it into a presentation with too many bullet points. Here it is simply living well enough to see the next season. The group eats slowly. Fish is shared in small portions. Roots are passed from hand to hand. Seeds become a coarse paste, smoky and earthy. Nothing is wasted. Bones can be used. Shells can be discarded in heaps that later archaeologists will study with great seriousness. Even leftovers can become evidence, which is a mildly unsettling thought when you think about your own kitchen bin. The afternoon drifts quietly. Some people continue gathering. Others repair tools. One person checks the woven trap again and adjusts its position in the stream. Another ties bundles of plants with strips of fibre. The work is not hurried, but it is constant. You sit with the warmth of the fire on your face and the cool scent of the stream behind you. Around you, the changing world offers not certainty, but variety. And variety in this age is a kind of protection. The great herds may shift. The giants may grow fewer. The cold may return for a season. But here are roots beneath the soil, fish in the stream, seeds in the grass, birds in the reeds, and hands that know what to do with them. As evening leans over the wetland, the firelight begins to glow against the darkening trees. You hear water moving, leaves trembling, voices murmuring softly. The meal settles warm in the body. The day folds down slowly. And you understand that survival after the Ice Age is not only about chasing what is disappearing. It is also about learning to notice what has newly arrived. You follow the sound of water before you see it, a steady low murmur threading through the land like a quiet guide. The stream you visited earlier has widened, now fed by countless smaller flows from melting ice and damp ground. It curves gently through the landscape, carving its path with patient persistence. The group moves alongside it without needing to discuss the choice. Water draws life, and life draws people. As the Ice Age loosens its hold, rivers begin to play an even greater role in shaping both land and human movement. Meltwater from glaciers feeds expanding river systems, sometimes turning small seasonal streams into more reliable channels. These waterways do more than carry water. They carry sediment, nutrients, fish, and perhaps most importantly, direction. You step carefully along the bank. The ground here is firm in places, soft in others, and occasionally slick where water has overflowed. The smell is fresh and layered. Wet stone, plant growth, a faint hint of decay where old vegetation breaks down into new soil. One of the group pauses and kneels by the edge, dipping a container into the water. It is lifted slowly, the surface tension breaking with a soft ripple. The water is clear here, unlike the cloudy meltwater lakes close to the ice. This clarity suggests the sediment has settled, and the river has begun to stabilize, at least for now. Findings from various regions indicate that rivers became crucial corridors for human groups during this transitional period. They provided consistent access to water-attracted animals and offered relatively predictable routes through shifting landscapes. Following a river could mean fewer surprises, which is always appreciated when survival is involved. You walk along a stretch where the river narrows slightly, flowing faster between two low banks. The sound grows louder here, a rushing, constant motion that fills the air. Small stones click and shift beneath the surface, carried along in short bursts before settling again. A small but interesting observation from archaeological work is that many ancient campsites are found near water sources, particularly rivers and lakes, that remained active over long periods. This suggests not only the practical importance of water, but also a preference for returning to places that offered reliable conditions. You step onto a flat rock near the edge and look downstream. The river bends out of sight, its path hidden by a rise in the land. You cannot see where it goes, but you know it leads somewhere useful. Rivers always do. Nearby, someone has begun setting up a simple fishing arrangement. A series of stakes is pushed into the shallow water, forming a loose barrier that guides fish toward a narrower opening. is not a perfect trap, but it increases the chances of catching something without constant effort. You watch as another person checks the flow, adjusting the placement of a branch. The movement is small but precise. It shows an understanding not just of fish but of water itself, how it moves, where it slows, where it carries things. Today we might rely on maps, GPS, and clearly marked paths to find our way. Here rivers serve as natural guides. They connect places, link seasons, and create a sense of continuity in a world that is otherwise shifting in many directions. You continue walking and the land beside the river begins to show signs of repeated use. The grass is worn in certain places. Stones are arranged in a way that suggests past fires. A slight indentation in the ground hints at where people may have rested before. This is not a permanent settlement, but it is not entirely new either. Some researchers propose that as environments became more stable in certain regions, people began revisiting specific locations more regularly. These places, often near reliable water sources, may have served as seasonal gathering points. Not quite villages, but familiar stops in a larger cycle of movement. You sit down near the bank, letting your hand trail through the water. It is cold, but not painfully so. The current presses gently against your fingers, constant and steady. The river carries more than water. It carries time. Sediment from distant hills, meltwater from shrinking ice, organic matter from growing plants. Everything flows together, shaping what comes next. A bird lands briefly on a nearby branch, its feathers catching the light before it lifts off again. The sound of its wings blends into the broader rhythm of the river. You notice how the group spreads out slightly here. Some stay close to the water, tending to traps and collecting plants. Others move a little farther inland, gathering materials or scouting the area. There is a quiet efficiency in the way they use the space, each person aware of what needs to be done without needing constant direction. A detail that often goes unmentioned is how much communication in these groups is nonverbal. A glance, a gesture, a shared understanding of routine. Words are used, of course, but much of the coordination happens through familiarity and observation. You lean back on your hands, feeling the ground beneath you. It's warmer now than it was in the morning, holding the day's heat. The air carries a mix of cool water and sun-warmed earth, a balance that feels almost comfortable. This is the kind of place that invites return, not because it is perfect, but because it is dependable. And in a world shaped by change, dependability becomes something close to treasure. You watch as the river continues its steady path, unconcerned with the past or the future. It flows because it must, carving, carrying, connecting. And as you sit beside it, listening to its quiet, endless movement, you begin to understand why people would follow it, return to it and build their lives around its presence. Because in a changing world, the river offers something rare, a line that holds. You follow the river until the bank rises and the ground becomes drier, lifting you above the damp edge where reeds and rushes sway in the slow current. Evening is beginning to gather again, not suddenly, but in soft layers. The light thins, the shadows stretch. The air cools around your hands and face, and the group begins looking for a place to rest. A shelter is never just a shelter here. It is warmth. It is safety. It is the difference between waking with stiff fingers and waking able to move. The landscape offers no ready-made houses, no doors, no windows, no roofs waiting kindly at the end of the day. People must shape comfort from what the land provides. Wood where trees grow, hides from animals, bones from large creatures, stone for weighing things down, grass bark, reeds, moss, and earth, each useful in the right place, if you know what you're doing. Before settled villages become common, many human groups live in shelters designed for movement. Some are temporary, built for a few nights. Others are returned to season after season and repaired again and again. In open Ice Age landscapes where trees can be scarce, people sometimes use large animal bones as part of shelter frames. In areas with more woodland, flexible branches and hides may be enough. The group chooses a slightly raised spot near the river, sheltered by young trees and angled away from the strongest wind. You watch as people move into familiar tasks, One gathers fallen branches, another clears stones from the ground. Someone checks an older fire pit blackened and partly filled with ash from a previous visit. So they have been here before. The thought settles gently. This place is known. The bend in the river, the rise of dry ground, the trees leaning together, the patch of stone suitable for a hearth. In a world without street names, memory becomes the address. You help carry branches to the centre of the clearing. They're light but rough, and the bark catches against your palms. The smell of fresh wood rises where one branch has cracked green and sharp. Nearby hides are unrolled with soft, heavy sounds. They smell of smoke, fat weather and use. Not unpleasant exactly, but strong like life lived close to the body. Archaeological discoveries from late Ice Age and early post-Ice Age sites show that people built a wide range of shelters from light temporary structures to more substantial dwellings with hearths, floors and storage areas. The exact form depended on climate-available materials and how long people planned to stay. You watch as flexible poles are pushed into the ground and bent inward, forming a low frame. Hides are stretched across part of it, then weighed down with stones along the edges. Openings are left carefully, not randomly, because smoke needs a path and people need to breathe. A simple structure, yes, but simple does not mean careless. One easily missed detail is that smoke from indoor hearths may have helped with more than warmth. It could dry hides, preserve food, discourage insects, and keep dampness from settling too deeply into materials. Of course, it also made everything smell like smoke. But judging by much of human history, we were apparently willing to accept that bargain. The shelter grows as the light fades. You notice how low it is built to conserve heat rather than impress visitors. There will be no grand entrance hall, no decorative foyer, no tiny table with keys on it. Just enough room for bodies, bundles, tools, and a fire placed where it can be watched. The first flames are kindled near the entrance, sheltered from the breeze. Dry grass catches quickly, then twigs, then thicker pieces of wood. The fire breathes into being, flickering against the hide walls. Light moves across the inside of the shelter in soft amber waves. Shadows tremble over hands and faces. You duck inside. The air is smoky at first, then warmer. The ground has been covered in grass hides and mats of plant fibre, making it softer than bare earth. You sit and feel the difference immediately. The wind fades to a muffled sound outside. The fire crackles gently. Someone adjusts a hide flap and the draft shifts. In colder regions, shelter design could make survival possible through long nights and harsh seasons. Even a small barrier against wind dramatically improves warmth. Layers matter. Ground insulation matters. Keeping the fire alive matters. These are not luxuries. They're engineering learned through necessity and refined by generations of attention. Debate continues among archaeologists about how socially organised some of these late Ice Age dwelling sites were. Some patterns suggest small family groups using compact shelters. Other sites appear larger, perhaps reflecting seasonal gatherings of multiple groups. The remains can show hearths, post holes, tool-making areas, and food debris, but translating those traces into daily life takes careful interpretation. You notice the way people arrange themselves inside. Older members closer to the warmth. Children tucked where they will not roll into trouble, which is a timeless parental concern. Tools placed near the wall. Food bundles kept away from damp ground. Every object has its place because space is limited and darkness makes searching unpleasant. Outside, the river continues its soft movement. Inside, the shelter gathers warmth. Smoke lifts through the opening and escapes in a slow ribbon. The smell settles into your hair and clothing. It is the smell of survival of evenings repeated across thousands of years. A hide wall brushes your shoulder. It feels thick and slightly stiff, warmed on one side by firelight and cooled on the other by night air. You hear the faint patter of something outside. Perhaps small bits of thawing ice slipping from branches, perhaps a light rain beginning. The shelter takes the sound and softens it. Today, many of us think of home as a fixed place with locks, rooms, bills, and perhaps one suspicious drawer full of cables no one understands. Here, home can be carried, rebuilt, remembered, and remade from bone, wood, skin, and fire. It is not less meaningful because it moves. The meal is simple tonight. Fish from the river roots gathered earlier, a little dried meat saved from before. The food is passed quietly. The firelight glows against faces. No one speaks loudly. The day has been full, and the night asks for gentleness. You listen to the shelter itself, the small creak of poles settling, the occasional tap of rain or thaw outside, the sigh of wind against hide, the low breathing of people resting near you. These sounds become a kind of ancient lullaby woven from practical things. The world beyond the shelter remains uncertain. Ice is melting, forests are growing, animals are moving. Cold can still return without warning. But here in this low warm space the uncertainty pauses. For a few hours there is only the fire, the shelter, the river nearby, and the quiet knowledge that humans have always made small rooms of safety inside enormous change. You lie back wrapped in warmth and smoke while the night folds over the land outside. You wake to the soft sound of stone touching stone. At first it is faint, almost part of the morning itself. A light tapping, a pause, then another tap sharper this time, followed by the tiny sound of a flake falling onto hide. The shelter is dim, warmed by the last breath of the fire. Smoke lingers high above, drifting toward the opening in a thin grey thread. Outside, the river moves steadily and birds call from the young trees. Inside, someone is already working. You sit up slowly, your covering slipping from your shoulder. The air is cool, but the shelter has held enough warmth to soften the morning. Near the entrance, a person sits with a small core of flint or chert in one hand and a hammerstone in the other. Their movements are calm and precise. They turn the stone, slightly study an edge, then strike. A thin flake breaks free. It lands with a dry whisper. This is not random chipping. It is skill. The maker sees shapes hidden inside the stone before they appear. Angles matter. Force matters. The quality of the stone matters. A wrong strike can ruin a piece. A good one can create a blade sharp enough to cut hide meat wood or plant fibre. During the late Ice Age and early Holocene, many toolkits became lighter and more specialised in different regions. Small stone blades and points, often called microliths by modern archaeologists, were fitted into handles, shafts, or composite tools. Instead of one large object doing one job, several tiny sharp pieces could be combined into a more flexible tool. You watch as the maker presses narrow flake into a groove along a wooden shaft. Resin, perhaps mixed with other materials, helps hold it. Sinew is wrapped tightly around the join. The result is elegant in its own quiet way. A tool made from stone, wood, plant gum, animal fibre, and human patience. A small detail from ancient toolmaking is that some adhesives used in prehistory required careful heating and mixing. Birch tar, for example, was used much earlier than this in parts of Europe and required controlled production. Imagine trying to make glue without a hardware store, a label, or a helpful person on the internet, explaining it in a 12-minute video. People managed it anyway. You move outside and settle near the fire pit where more work is underway. A hide is spread on the ground to catch flakes so they are not lost in the dirt. Finished pieces lie grouped by size. Some are narrow and delicate. Others are broad or useful for scraping or cutting. A few broken fragments are set aside, perhaps still useful for smaller tasks. The morning light catches the edges of the tools. They gleam briefly like bits of frozen water. It is easy from a modern distance to underestimate stone. But a sharp flint blade can be astonishingly effective. It can slice cleanly. It can be replaced when broken. It can be made from materials gathered, traded, or carried across long distances. Stone tools are not crude leftovers from a clumsy age. They are solutions shaped by hands that know exactly what they need. Interpretations vary on why microlithic technologies spread and changed across regions during this broad period. Some researchers connect them to new hunting methods, especially arrows, darts, or composite projectile points. Others emphasize flexibility, portability, and the need for adaptable tools in changing environments. The likely answer, as usual, is not one tidy explanation, but a mixture of practical needs. You pick up a finished piece with permission. It's smaller than you expected, almost fragile. But its edge is keen. You hold it carefully between finger and thumb, aware that a careless movement could open your skin. The stone is cooled smooth on one side and ridged on the other where flakes have been removed. Nearby, a child watches the toolmaker with solemn focus. They are given a poor piece of stone to practice on, and their first strike produces nothing useful. The adult does not laugh. They simply adjust the child's hand, changes the angle and gestures to try again. Teaching here is patient because skill takes years and every skilled hand matters. The smell of breakfast begins to rise from the rekindled fire. Fish bones from the previous night are warmed with roots and perhaps a little fat. The scent is smoky, earthy, and rich. Someone adds a few dry sticks and the flames brighten. You notice the connection between tools and the changing world around you. Smaller points can be useful for hunting quicker animals in forested or mixed landscapes. Scrapers help prepare hides. Awls pierce holes for stitching. Blades cut reeds for mats or traps. Grinding stones help process seeds. As food sources diversify, tools diversify too. Today, tools often arrive finished packaged and slightly annoying to open. Here tools are born from landscape and labour. A river cobble, a flint nodule, a deer tendon, a branch, a lump of resin. The world provides materials, but humans provide imagination. You walk a little way from camp with one of the younger hunters. They carry a light shaft tipped with small stone inserts. It is easier to carry than a heavy spear, and can be repaired by replacing a broken piece, rather than remaking the whole weapon. In a mobile life that matters, weight matters, repair matters, the distance between camps matters. The riverbank is damp underfoot. You see reeds bending gently in the breeze. The hunter cuts one with a small blade, quick and clean. The plant falls without tearing. The tool works. Back near the shelter, another person uses a scraper on a hide stretched over a frame. The sound is steady, a dry rasp that continues for several minutes, then pauses while the hide is turned. The work requires strength and rhythm. The finished material will become a clothing bedding covering, straps, bags, perhaps part of a shelter wall. This is the hidden side of survival. Not the dramatic moment of a hunt, but the long hours of maintenance. Scraping, cutting, binding, sharpening, grinding, mending. A life made possible by repeated small acts. You sit again near the toolmaker as the sun climbs higher. The pile of stone flakes grows slowly. Most pieces are waste, but even waste tells a story. In later ages, archaeologists will study scatter patterns to understand where people sat, what they made, how long they stayed, and sometimes whether a site was used by skilled makers or learners. One forgotten flake can become a sentence in the ancient record. The toolmaker lifts another core, turns it in the light and strikes. A perfect sliver falls free. No celebration, no speech. Just a slight nod, and the work continues. Around you the world keeps changing, but the hands beside the fire remain steady. Ice melts, forests spread, rivers shift, animals move, and humans answer not only with movement and memory, but with invention. Small blades, careful bindings, sharp edges, quiet skill. You listen again to stone touching stone, and the sound becomes part of the morning rhythm, as soft and ancient as water over pebbles. You step away from the steady rhythm of tool-making and follow a softer sound, something closer to a low breathing, mixed with the faint scrape of movement on earth. It draws your attention not with urgency, but with familiarity, as if it belongs to the background of life here. Near the edge of the camp, just beyond the reach of the main firelight, you see them. A pair of animals resting. They are not quite wolves. Not quite what you would call dogs either. Something in between. One lifts its head as you approach, ears alert but not tense. Its eyes catch the light, reflecting a quiet awareness. It watches you, not as prey, not as a threat, but as something known. Then slowly it lowers its head again and settles back into the earth. The people nearby do not react. They are used to this presence. The relationship between humans and these animals is still forming in this time. Long before formal breeding or clear categories, certain wolves began living closer to human groups. Perhaps they were drawn by scraps. Perhaps they were tolerated because they helped warn of danger. Over generations, this quiet coexistence began to change both species. Genetic and archaeological evidence suggests that the domestication of dogs began at least 15,000 years ago, possibly earlier, though the exact timing and location remain uncertain. What you're seeing now may be part of that long, gradual process. You sit down a short distance away, careful not to disturb them. The ground is cool beneath you, dotted with small stones and flattened grass. The air carries the familiar scent of smoke mixed now with animal fur and damp earth. One of the animals rises and moves closer to a person sitting near the fire. It does not beg. It does not demand. It simply settles nearby, close enough to share warmth, far enough to keep its own space. The person glances down briefly, then continues their work as if this arrangement requires no explanation. A small but fascinating detail from early domestication studies is that the first animals to live alongside humans were not necessarily fully controlled or owned in the modern sense. Instead, the relationship may have been mutual and flexible, with both sides gaining something from proximity. You watch as a scrap of food is placed on the ground. One of the animals approaches, takes it gently and retreats. No rush, no competition, just a quiet exchange. You might wonder how this began. Perhaps a wolf lingered at the edge of a camp watching. Perhaps it returned again and again, drawn by the scent of food. Perhaps the least fearful individual stayed closer while others kept their distance. Over time, a kind of trust formed. Not perfect, not complete, but enough. Some researchers suggest that this early partnership may have helped humans in hunting, providing additional senses and speed. Others believe the initial benefit may have been more about warning and protection, with animals alerting people to approaching threats. As with many ancient developments, the full picture is likely a blend of several factors. The animal near you shifts slightly, curling its body tighter against the ground. Its fur looks thick, suited to the cold nights that still return from time to time. Its breathing is slow, steady. There's a calmness to it that feels almost familiar even across thousands of years. You think about how today animals live in homes, sleep on soft surfaces, respond to names, and sometimes behave as though they own the place entirely. Here the relationship is quieter, less defined, but no less meaningful. You reach out slowly, stopping just short of contact. The animal opens one eye, watches your hand, then closes it again. You take that as a gentle suggestion to respect its space. Nearby, a child sits watching the same animal with quiet fascination. They mimic its posture, curling slightly, resting their chin on their hands. The animal flicks an ear but does not move away. Learning happens in moments like this. Not through instruction, but through observation. You hear a soft sound behind you. Another animal, slightly larger, moves through the edge of the camp, nose low to the ground. It pauses near a cluster of bones, sniffs, then moves on. Its presence is accepted but not ignored. A person glances in its direction, aware but not alarmed. This balance is delicate. Too much familiarity and danger increases. Too much distance and the benefits fade. What you are witnessing is not a finished relationship, but one in progress. Some experts continue to explore how this early connection between humans and animals influenced later developments. Did it change hunting success? Did it affect settlement patterns? Did it shape social structures? The answers are still being pieced together from bones, genetics, and scattered traces of shared space. You sit quietly watching as the light shifts across the ground. The sun has risen higher now, warming the air slightly. The animals remain where they are, part of the scene without dominating it. The group continues its work around them. Tools are repaired, Food is prepared, bundles are checked. The presence of these animals does not interrupt the flow of life. It blends into it. You notice how the animals respond to sound. A sudden movement, a sharp noise, and their heads lift instantly. Their awareness extends beyond what human senses alone can catch. In this way, they become an early warning system, a living extension of the group's perception. The wind shifts again, carrying new scents from the river and the forest beyond. The animals notice first. Their ears turn slightly, their noses lift. Then they settle again, the signal passing without alarm. You feel a quiet sense of continuity in this moment. Humans and animals sharing space. Not as master and pet, not as hunter and prey, but as something more balanced. A partnership that will grow, change, and eventually become one of the most enduring relationships in human history. You stand slowly brushing the ground from your hands. The animals do not follow, but they watch. Not with fear, not with affection exactly, but with recognition. And as you step back toward the center of the camp, the soft presence of these early companions remains behind you, woven into the quiet fabric of a world learning new ways to live. You leave the camp as afternoon fades, following a narrow path that climbs toward a ridge of pale stone. The air grows cooler as you rise. Behind you the river bends through the low ground, flashing silver between reeds and young trees. Ahead the hillside darkens where a wide opening waits in the rock. A cave. The group approaches it without hurry, but with a quiet shift in mood. Voices lower, steps slow. Even the animals near the camp do not follow far. This place is not ordinary shelter, not tonight. It feels separate from the daily rhythm of food, fire tools, and travel. Before you enter, you pause near the mouth of the cave. Cold air flows from within, smelling of stone, damp earth, old smoke, and something mineral like rain on rock. The opening frames the outside world in soft evening light. Beyond it, the sky's pale blue, the trees thin and dark against the slope. Inside, darkness waits. During the late Ice Age, people in many parts of Europe and beyond created paintings, engravings, and marks in caves and rock shelters. These images often showed animals such as horses, bison, deer, mammoths, and wild cattle. Some were made thousands of years before the time you're visiting, yet their presence still belongs to the long memory of Ice Age life. A torch is lit from a small ember carried in a protected bundle. Dry material catches, then a resin-rich stick begins to burn with a smoky flame. The light is warm and restless, licking across the cave wall. Shadows move as though the stone itself is breathing. You step inside. The temperature changes at once. The cave holds the cold in a deep, steady way. Your footsteps sound different here, softer in some places, sharper in others. Water drips somewhere far within each drop, echoing lightly. The smell of smoke thickens as the torch burns. The passage narrows, then opens into a chamber. The torchlight reaches the wall and slowly shapes appear. An animal first, then another. A long back, a curved horn, a heavy head. Lines drawn with confidence, with economy, with understanding. The animal is not merely copied, it is remembered. Its movement lives in the curve of the body, the angle of the legs, the tension in the neck. You stand still. The firelight makes the image shift. Shadows ripple over the painted surface, and for a moment the animal seems to move. Not dramatically, not like some loud modern special effect, thank goodness, but gently as if stepping through memory. One fascinating detail from cave studies is that some artists use the natural shape of rock walls to enhance their images. A bulge in the stone might become the shoulder of a bison. A crack might suggest a back or horn. The cave was not just a blank surface, it was part of the art. You move closer, careful not to touch. The pigments are made from materials like charcoal manganese and iron oxides, including red and yellow ochre. These minerals are ground, mixed, blown, brushed, or applied by hand. The work requires planning. Light must be carried in. Pigments must be prepared. People must choose where to go, what to mark, and how. Nearby you see handprints on the wall. Some are made by pressing a painted hand directly onto stone. Others are negative prints created by blowing pigment around the hand so that the untouched shape remains. The effect is intimate. A hand from thousands of years ago rests in silence before you, fingers spread, palm open. It feels strangely close. A person stood here. A person breathed here. A person lifted their hand to this wall and left a trace. Experts offer several interpretations of Ice Age cave art. Some see hunting magic. Others see spiritual practice storytelling, social memory teaching, or journeys into sacred spaces. The meaning may not have been the same everywhere. It may have changed from group to group, generation to generation, image to image. You continue deeper into the chamber. The torch crackles softly. Smoke rises and gathers near the ceiling. Your eyes adjust to the moving light. More animals emerge from the walls, layered over one another in places. Some are bold and clear. Others are faint, almost lost in the stone. You notice dots, lines, symbols, marks that do not show animals at all. Their meanings remain harder to grasp. Outside, the world is changing. Ice is melting, forests are spreading. Animals are shifting their paths. But here inside the cave, the old animal world remains held in pigment and stone. It is not frozen exactly. It is alive in a different way, protected from rain and sun, waiting in darkness. You hear a low voice behind you. Someone speaks softly, perhaps telling a story, perhaps naming the animals, perhaps saying something meant only for this place. The words are quiet enough that the cave seems to absorb them. The group listens. Even the children are still. You wonder whether these images helped people remember where animals moved, or whether they connected humans to something beyond the visible world. Maybe both. Maybe neither in the way we would phrase it. Modern categories can feel a little clumsy here, like trying to fold a blanket with mittens on. There is another subtle point to notice. Caves are not always comfortable places. They're cold, dark, and sometimes difficult to reach. So when people chose to go deep inside and make images there, it suggests purpose, not casual decoration, not someone idly doodling beside the kitchen fire. These spaces mattered. You sit on a stone ledge while the torchlight plays across the wall. The stone beneath you is cold and the chill seeps through your clothing. The air is still. You hear breathing flame, distant dripping water. Each sound is small, but in the cave it becomes clear. A person near the wall lifts a piece of pigment and marks a short line beside an older image. The gesture is careful, brief. The new mark joins the old ones, not replacing them, but becoming part of the layered memory of the place. You think of the mammoth tracks filling with water, the young trees spreading through the plains, the river carrying meltwater toward unknown seas. So much of this world is temporary. Footprints vanish, camps decay, hides rot, wooden tools disappear. But here on stone something lasts. Not everything, not enough to answer every question, but enough to whisper. You stand again and take one last slow look around the chamber. The animals remain in the flickering light, patient and silent. They belong to the world outside and to the world within memory. They are food, danger, beauty, mystery and presence. As the group turns back toward the cave mouth, the outside light appears faint and blue ahead. You follow, carrying the scent of smoke and cold stone with you. Behind you, the painted animals slip back into darkness, waiting as they have waited for ages. When you step outside, the evening air feels wide and soft. The first stars are appearing. The river below murmurs in the distance. And you understand that even as the Ice Age ends, people are not only surviving its changes, they are remembering, they are imagining, they are leaving quiet marks against the dark. You descend from the cave as night settles behind the ridge, carrying with you the smell of smoke and cold stone. The painted animals remain in darkness, now hidden inside the hill, while the living world waits outside in pale starlight. Below, the river moves through the valley with its patient murmur, and the campfire glows like a small orange eye near the trees. You walk back with the group in silence. No one seems eager to break the mood. The cave has left something quiet in everyone, as though the darkness inside it has followed you gently into the open air. By morning, the path turns away from the ridge and follows the river downstream. The land begins to change again. The banks grow wider, the soil becomes richer. The trees stand closer together in some places, but open clearings appear too warmed by sunlight and busy with birds. You see signs that people have come here many times before. Old hearths, worn paths, shells and bones scattered near the edge of a dry rise. Places where the earth has been pressed flat by repeated use. This is where the story begins to lean towards something new. Not a city, not even a village in the later sense, but a place people return to often enough that the land itself begins to remember them. As climates warmed after the Ice Age, some regions offered more dependable food sources than before. Rivers, lakes, wetlands, coastlines, and woodland edges could support people for longer stretches of the year. In such places, groups did not always need to move constantly across huge distances. They could stay longer, return more often, and build structures that lasted beyond a few nights. You approach a cluster of shelters near a bend in the river. At first, they seem like any other camp low shapes made from wood, hide, reed, and earth. But then you notice the difference. There are more of them. They are arranged with space between them, not randomly, but in a pattern shaped by repeated living. Some hearths are deeper and more carefully lined. A few storage pits have been dug into the ground and covered with woven mats, bark, or stones. Smoke rises from several fires. People move between shelters carrying baskets, bundles of reeds, fish, and tools. Children run a short distance, then are called back by an adult who has clearly performed this exact correction many times. A dog-like animal trots near them, pretending not to care about the fish. Archaeological evidence from the early Holocene shows that in several parts of the world, especially in resource-rich areas, human groups began living in more settled or semi-settled communities. These settlements varied widely, but they marked an important shift from highly mobile life toward longer stays in known places. You step into the settlement slowly noticing details. The ground is packed harder near the entrances of shelters. Ash from old fires has darkened the soil. Fish bones lie in a discard area near the river, along with cracked shells and plant remains. There are tools for cutting, scraping, grinding, and weaving. Some objects seem too heavy or awkward to carry constantly, which suggests people expect to return. That expectation changes everything. A seasonal camp says we're here for now. A returning place says we may come back. A settlement says perhaps we belong here for longer. A small, often overlooked detail is that storage may have been one of the great quiet innovations of this period. Drying fish, keeping nuts, storing seeds, preserving meat and protecting food from animals or dampness allowed people to stay in one area longer. It also introduced new worries because once food is stored, someone has to guard it, manage it, and remember who it belongs to. Civilization naturally begins with snacks and immediately invents complications. You watch a person lift a woven basket from a storage pit. Inside are nuts dry and carefully kept. The basket smells faintly sweet, woody, and smoky. Another person checks strips of fish hung near the smoke of a fire, drying slowly in the warm haze. The fish glisten slightly, their scent sharp and salty even this far from the sea if the river connects to brackish waters or coastal routes. People here are not idle. Settling longer does not mean working less. In fact, it may mean working differently. More repairs to shelters, more storage, more planning, more attention to nearby resources, more cleaning of shared spaces, which is perhaps the least romantic but most believable sign of community life. The mood of the place is calm, busy, and lived in. You hear the scrape of stone on either crackle of several fires, the soft slap of wet reeds being bundled, the laughter of children, the low hum of adults speaking in the shade. The smell is richer than in smaller camps. Smoke fish, damp earth, bodies, plants, dogs, and old ash all blend together. Some archaeologists suggest that semi-permanent settlements encourage new social habits, including stronger ties between groups, more shared rituals, and perhaps clearer claims over territory. Others warn that mobility remained important for a long time. and that many communities moved between settled places and seasonal camps depending on food and weather. The line between wandering and settling was not sharp. It was soft, flexible, and shaped by local conditions. You sit near a shelter entrance where someone is weaving reeds into a mat. The reeds are damp and cool to the touch, bending without breaking. The person works them over and under, forming a surface that might be used for flooring, covering, or carrying. The motion is steady and soothing. A child beside them imitates the pattern with smaller reeds, creating something lopsided but sincere. Across the clearing, an older person sits near a hearth, shaping a bone tool with patient strokes. Their face is lined by age, wind smoke, and expression. People come to them now and then asking something, showing an object, receiving a gesture or a word. In a larger, more settled group, knowledge gathers around those who have lived long enough to remember many seasons. Today, when we think of a settlement, we may imagine streets, houses, addresses, and a mild disagreement about parking. Here, settlement begins much more quietly. A repeated hearth, a storage pit, a stronger shelter, a path worn by bare feet, a place where people expect to see one another again. You walk toward the river at the edge of the settlement. Fish traps sit in the shallows, their woven shapes tremble in the current. Nearby, a pile of smooth stones may have been used for cooking, heated in a fire, and dropped into containers of water. Steam rises from one such vessel carrying the scent of herbs or roots. The river which guided movement before now also anchors life. It feeds people, marks territory, and connects this place to other places. Downstream there may be another camp. Upstream another group may know the same bends and crossings. Movement continues, but now it moves between points of return. As dusk comes, the settlement glows with several small fires rather than one. The effect is gentle and beautiful. Light pools in separate places, each shelter holding its own warmth while smoke rises into the evening and drifts among the trees. You stand in the middle of the clearing listening. The sounds overlap softly. A baby fussing, then settling. A tool tapping. Reeds rustling, water moving, someone laughing under their breath. Dogs shifting near the fires, the night gathering at the edge of the trees. This is not yet the world of fields and walls, but it is no longer only the world of passing through. Here beside the river, people are beginning to stay long enough for place to become memory, for memory to become belonging, and for belonging to become one of the deepest changes of all. You remain near the edge of the settlement as the evening deepens, watching how the last light fades from the river and settles into the low places between trees. The fires grow brighter by contrast, each one holding a small circle of warmth and activity. Smoke drifts upward in thin layers, catching the fading glow before dissolving into the dark. The air is calm tonight. You notice someone carrying a small bundle toward a cleared patch of ground not far from the shelters. Others follow, bringing tools, baskets, and something wrapped carefully in plant fibers. The movement draws your attention not because it is loud or urgent, but because it feels deliberate. You step closer, keeping a respectful distance. The ground here has been worked before. It is softer than the surrounding earth, turned and pressed in a way that suggests repeated use. Someone kneels and begins to loosen the soil with a digging stick, pushing it down and levering it gently upward. Another person scatters something small into the shallow trench. Seeds. You watch as they are covered lightly with soil, not buried deeply, but just enough to settle them into place. The motion is simple, almost casual, but it carries weight. This is not full agriculture. Not yet. But it is something close to intention. In several parts of the world, evidence suggests that late Ice Age and early post-Ice Age communities began interacting with plants in new ways. They did not suddenly invent farming overnight. Instead, they observed, gathered, returned, and sometimes encouraged certain plants to grow where they were useful. You kneel and touch the soil after the seeds are covered. It's cool and slightly damp, holding together in small clumps. It smells rich, alive, with the slow work of decay and renewal. A place where something can grow if the conditions hold. One often overlooked detail is that people may have unintentionally shaped plant growth long before deliberate planting became common. Seeds dropped near camps, waste discarded in certain areas, and repeated visits to the same location could all influence which plants thrive nearby. What begins as accident can become awareness, and awareness can become habit. You sit back on your heels and watch as the group finishes their work. There is no ceremony, no announcement. The act is folded quietly into the rhythm of the day, like gathering wood or tending a fire. But the difference is they're subtle but real. Instead of only taking from the land, there is now a hint of giving something back, or at least guiding what might return. You might think about how today planting something often comes with clear intention. Gardens, farms, carefully planned rows, schedules, tools designed for efficiency. Here the process is smaller, less certain, but no less meaningful. A person brushes their hands against their clothing, removing bits of soil. Another checks the edge of the planted area, placing a few small stones as markers. Not to fence it off, but to remember. Memory matters here. Where something was found, where something might grow again. Some researchers believe that this kind of early plant management laid the groundwork for later agricultural practices. Others suggest that many groups continued to rely primarily on wild resources for a long time, using planting only as a minor supplement. The path toward farming was not direct, and it did not happen at the same time everywhere. You stand and walk a little farther from the planted patch, looking back at it from a slight distance. It does not stand out much, just a small area of disturbed soil darker than the ground around it. Easy to miss if you didn't know what had happened there. But you do know, and that changes how you see it. Nearby, someone gathers dry grasses and arranges them over another patch of ground, perhaps to protect it, perhaps to mark it. The intention is quiet but present. The firelight flickers across the scene, casting soft shadows. The planted earth holds the last warmth of the day, while the air above cools steadily. You hear the river moving in the distance, steady as always. It does not notice the seeds. It does not change its path. But it will play its part, bringing water, shaping the land, influencing what grows and what does not. You return to the centre of the settlement where the fires burn brighter now. Food is being prepared again. Fish roots, seeds, and whatever else the day has provided. The smells are familiar, comforting. But something feels different. Not in the food, not in the tools, in the idea. The idea that the land can be shaped even slightly to meet human needs. You sit near one of the fires, feeling its warmth against your hands. A child nearby plays with a small bundle of seeds, letting them slip through their fingers like sand. An adult gently takes the bundle back, tying it securely and placing it out of reach. Seeds are small, easy to lose, easy to forget, and yet they carry possibility. You look out toward the darker edge of the settlement where the planted patch lies hidden in shadow. It will not grow overnight. It may not grow at all. Weather animals and chance will all play their roles, but the act itself matters. A step, a beginning. Not the full story of agriculture, but one of its earliest quiet chapters. You lean back slightly, watching the sparks rise from the fire into the night. Each one glows briefly, then fades, leaving only darkness behind. Except for the ground, where something unseen has been placed, and where if the conditions are right, something new may rise. You wake before sunrise to the soft hush of the settlement breathing around you. The fires have burned low and the air carries that familiar blend of cold, dawn-old smoke, damp earth, and sleeping bodies tucked beneath hides and woven coverings. Somewhere near the river, a dog-like animal gives a quiet huff, then settles again. The planted patch from the night before lies hidden in the half-light. Nothing has changed there yet, of course. Seeds do not rise simply because people have hopes for them. The earth has its own pace, and it is not especially interested in human impatience. Still, the idea remains. You step out into the cool morning and follow a narrow path between shelters. The ground is packed from repeated footsteps. Near one doorway, a grinding stone rests beside a basket. Near another, fish hang where smoke can reach them. A child sleeps curled beside an older person, their hair catching a faint silver edge from the coming day. This is the long road toward agriculture, though no one here would name it that. There is no sudden invention, no single person standing up and saying, "Wonderful news, I have discovered farming." Instead, there are many small decisions repeated across generations. Return to this place. Save these seeds. Clear this patch. Protect this plant. Watch what happens. After the Ice Age, warmer and more stable climates in several regions made plant growth more predictable than it had been during colder, harsher periods. This stability helped create conditions in which people could experiment with managing plants and animals more consistently. It did not force farming into existence, but it made new choices possible. You walk toward the river where morning mist floats above the water. A person is already checking fish traps, their feet planted carefully among smooth stones. Another gathers reeds from the bank, cutting them with a small blade and stacking them in neat bundles. Work begins early here, but not with the harsh clatter of later fields or metal tools. It begins with water fibre, stone and hands. Nearby, someone opens a storage pit. The covering is lifted slowly and the smell of dried plant foods rises from within, warm and nutty despite the cold air. The stored food is checked carefully. Dampness would be dangerous. Mould could ruin what took days or weeks to gather. A few pieces are removed, inspected and set aside. One quiet truth of early settled life is that storage changes society. When food can be kept, people can stay longer. But stored food also brings responsibility. Someone must protect it from animals, weather insects, and perhaps other people. A full pit is comfort, yes, but also a worry with a lid on it. A curious detail from early farming studies is that the first domesticated plants often looked only slightly different from their wild ancestors. The dramatic rows of grain fields we imagine came much later. At the beginning, the difference between wild gathering and early cultivation could be subtle, almost blurry, like a path just starting to appear in grass. You sit near a woman sorting seeds on a hide. She moves them into small piles, discarding broken pieces, bits of husk and tiny stones. The sound is soft, a dry whisper, as seeds slide beneath her fingers. Her attention is steady. The best seeds may be eaten, stored, traded, or perhaps planted. Each choice has consequences. A child reaches toward one pile and she gently taps their hand away. Not harshly, just enough to say, "Not that one." The child watches, then begins sorting a smaller pile of less important seeds nearby, learning again in quiet imitation. The move toward agriculture did not mean life immediately became easier. In fact, many early farming communities faced new problems. Diets could become less varied, work could become more repetitive. Settled groups could experience more disease, more waste build-up, and new tensions over land and stored food. Comfort and complication often arrive holding hands, which is very inconsiderate of them. You follow the path beyond the shelters to a small clearing. The soil has been disturbed in several places. Not a field, not yet. More like a set of remembered patches, each one linked to a season, a plant, a hope. Someone uses a digging stick to loosen the ground. Another removes stones. A third scatters plant remains nearby, perhaps waste, perhaps mulch, perhaps simply the easiest place to throw things. Interpretations remain mixed about whether some communities adopted cultivation because they wanted greater food control, or because changing environments and growing populations made older ways less reliable. In some places, people may have chosen farming slowly. In others, they may have been nudged toward it by pressure, opportunity, or necessity. You kneel at the edge of the clearing and press your palm to the soil. It is cool, damp, and grainy. Tiny roots thread through it. If you listen, there is no sound from beneath the surface, no dramatic stirring, no tiny plant announcement. Just silence. But the silence holds possibility. Behind you, the settlement grows louder as more people wake. Fires are fed, baskets are moved. A tool knocks against stone. Someone laughs softly at something you do not see. A dog noses too close to a food bundle and is pushed away with a tired gesture that feels wonderfully familiar. You think of the older life of constant movement across wide landscapes. It offered freedom, variety, and deep knowledge of large territories. This newer way offers return storage shelter and the chance to shape a familiar place. Neither is simple, neither is perfect. Human history rarely hands out clean upgrades. Today we often speak of progress as if it always moves upward like a neat staircase with good lighting. But here the path is winding. Farming will one day support villages, towns, kingdoms, temples, writing and markets. It will also bring heavier labour inequality conflict over land and diseases that spread more easily among settled people. The seed is small, but the future inside it is enormous. The sun finally rises over the trees, touching the planted patches with pale gold. Dew shines on leaves. Smoke curls from the settlement behind you. The river keeps moving indifferent and generous. You stand and watch people work the ground, not as farmers in the full later sense, but as careful observers testing a new relationship with the earth. They are still hunters, gatherers, fishers, makers, travellers, storytellers. Yet now, here and there, they are also becoming tenders of plants. The Ice Age has ended not with one loud event, but with 1,000 quiet adjustments. A seed saved, a patch cleared, a shelter repaired, a river followed, a meal stored. You turn back toward the settlement as morning warms your face. Behind you, the disturbed soil waits under the rising sun, holding its small hidden promise. And somewhere beneath it, unseen for now, the long road to agriculture begins in the dark. You leave the small cleared patches behind and walk toward a sunlit slope where wild grasses sway in the morning air. The settlement is still close enough that you can hear it behind you, the low sounds of waking fires, moving baskets, and voices softened by distance. Ahead, the land opens into a gentle rise, warmer and drier than the riverbank, with pale seed heads bending under the weight of dew. At first glance, the grasses seem ordinary. Thin stems, narrow leaves, small grains held in delicate clusters. But you are looking at something that will one day help transform human life. This is not a golden field, as later farmers would know it. There are no straight rows, no ploughs, no fences, no barns waiting nearby. The plants grow wild, mixed with others scattered by wind animals and chance. Yet among them are the ancestors of crops that future people will depend on, especially in parts of Southwest Asia, where wild wheat and barley would become central to early farming. You step carefully through the grass. The seed heads brush against your legs with a dry whisper. When you touch one, a few grains loosen and fall into your palm. They're small, hard, and easy to lose. It takes effort to gather enough to matter. Still gathered in quantity, dried, ground, and cooked, they can feed people well. By the early Holocene, communities in the Fertile Crescent began harvesting wild cereals such as wheat and barley, before full domestication took hold. Over time, human harvesting and planting favoured plants with traits that made them easier to gather, including seed heads that did not shatter as readily in the wild. You kneel beside a person cutting grass stems with a small stone blade set into a handle. The motion is smooth and repetitive. A handful is gathered, sliced near the top, and placed into a basket. The blade makes a faint rasping sound as it moves through the stems. The smell is dry green and slightly dusty, warmed by the rising sun. A detail that might make you smile is that wild wheat has a habit of dropping its seeds when ripe, which is excellent for the plant and deeply annoying for hungry humans. Later domesticated wheat held onto its seeds more stubbornly, making harvest easier. In a sense, farming partly began when humans favoured the least cooperative wild grasses from the plant's point of view. The group works quietly along the slope. Some cut the seed heads, others sort them. A few watch for birds that seem very interested in the same food, because apparently competition for breakfast is older than civilization. The baskets fill slowly, not with abundance, but with patient accumulation. You take a basket and feel its weight. Light at first, then gradually heavier. Each handful matters. Each small grain is almost nothing alone, but together they become possibility. The background here is important. As climates became warmer and more stable after the Ice Age, wild cereals grew more predictably in certain regions. People who returned to the same places year after year could learn when grasses ripened, where they grew thickest, and how to process them. The relationship between people and plants became more regular, more intimate, more deliberate. Still, the line between gathering and farming remains soft. At this moment, people are harvesting what grows naturally. Perhaps they also scatter seeds near camp. Perhaps they clear competing plants. Perhaps they return at just the right season. Each action nudges the relationship closer to cultivation, but not all at once. There is ongoing discussion among archaeobotanists about how quickly domestication happened. Some evidence points to a long period of plant management before fully domesticated crops became common. Other interpretations suggest that in certain places once cultivation intensified, recognizable domesticated traits spread more rapidly. The story differs by plant, by region, and by community. You follow the harvested grasses back toward the settlement. The seed heads are spread on a flat hide near the fire where they can dry further. Someone beats them gently with a stick to loosen the grains. Chaff and dust rise into the warm air. You smell dry straw smoke and earth. A child sneezes and someone laughs softly. Next comes sorting, then grinding, then cooking. Nothing about this is quick. A meal made from grain carries within it hours of labour. Cutting, carrying, drying, threshing, winnowing, grinding, mixing, heating. The final food may look simple, but the process behind it is long and skilled. You sit near a grinding stone and listen as grain is crushed beneath a smaller handstone. The rhythm is steady, low and soothing. Stone moves forward and back, forward and back. The grains break into coarse meal. Tiny fragments gather in the shallow hollow of the larger stone. The person grinding pauses to stretch their fingers. This work is hard on hands, wrists, shoulders and back. Later, farming life will bring more of this repeated labour often done daily. The rise of grain is not only the rise of bread and stored food, it is also the rise of aching joints, worn teeth from stone grit in flour and long hours close to the ground. A gentle modern aside then, the next time bread appears beside your soup, as if by magic it may be worth offering one sleepy little thank you to all the ancient people who spent centuries convincing grasses to become dinner. The meal being prepared here is rough, nothing like modern bread. The ground grain may be mixed with water into a paste cooked on hot stones or added to other foods. It smells nutty as it warms, rich and comforting. Smoke curls around it, adding its own flavour. You taste a small piece when it's offered. It is coarse, earthy, slightly sweet if you're generous, and deeply satisfying after the morning's work. It holds warmth well. It fills the stomach. It can be carried if dried. These qualities matter. Beyond the shelter, the wild grasses continue moving in the wind. They look unchanged, yet their future has already begun to bend toward humans. Not because they chose to, of course. Plants are not signing contracts here. But through countless small acts of gathering, sorting, saving and planting, people will slowly reshape them. And the plants will reshape people in return. More grain means more storage. More storage means longer stays. Longer stays mean stronger shelters, more births, more waste, more rules, more neighbours, more memory fixed to place. You look back toward the slope where the wild wheat grows. The light has shifted now, turning the seed heads pale gold. In the breeze they shimmer softly like a field dreaming of the future. You stand quietly for a moment listening to the grasses whisper. They do not sound important. They do not sound like cities, temples, tax collectors, markets, or morning toast. They sound like dry stems brushing together in the sun, and yet inside those tiny grains, a new chapter of human life is waiting patient as sleep small as a seed, and powerful enough to change the world. You remain near the grinding stone as the morning stretches into midday, the steady rhythm of crushed grain blending into the soft hum of the settlement. The air is warmed now, carrying the scent of cooked food, smoke damp soil and something faintly sour where plant scraps have begun to break down. Life here feels fuller, thicker, layered with activity, and slowly, almost without anyone noticing at first, life itself is beginning to change. Not just the land, not just the animals, but people. You watch as someone stands up from the grinding stone and stretches their back, pressing a hand into their lower spine. The motion is slow, familiar, and perhaps a little uncomfortable. Another person sits nearby, rubbing their wrist after repeated work with a scraper. A child chews on a piece of dried food, their teeth working carefully, grinding against something that is not entirely smooth. The shift toward more plant-based diets, especially grains, brings new patterns into the body. Archaeological studies of early farming communities show changes in human skeletons compared to earlier hunter-gatherers. Bones sometimes show signs of repetitive strain. Teeth may wear differently, often more heavily, especially when tiny particles of stone from grinding tools mix into food. You kneel and pick up a pinch of ground grain from the stone. It feels coarse between your fingers, not like fine flour, but something rougher, more uneven. When mixed and cooked, it becomes food, but it carries with it the marks of its making. A small but telling detail is that early agricultural diets were often less varied than those of foraging groups. While farming provided more predictable food in some cases, it could also narrow what people ate, especially when communities relied heavily on a few staple crops. You look around the settlement again with this in mind. Fish still hang by the fire, roots are still gathered, animals are still hunted, but the balance is shifting, and balance matters. You notice a child with a slight curve in their posture as they sit, their bones still growing, shaped by food movement and daily life. Nearby, an older person moves more slowly than others, their steps careful, their hands steady but deliberate. Bodies tell stories even when words are not used. Some researchers suggest that the move toward a more settled life brought both benefits and challenges to human health. Greater food storage could reduce the risk of starvation in some seasons, but living closer together might increase the spread of illness. More stable shelter offered protection, but less movement could change strength and endurance over time. You sit back and watch as a group of people prepare another meal. The process is familiar now: grinding, mixing, heating. The smell rises again, warm and comforting, filling the air. A dog-like companion moves through the camp, pausing near a child who offers a small scrap. The animal takes it gently, then moves on. Its presence feels natural, now part of the daily rhythm. You think about how today we often separate body and environment in our minds. Diet plans, exercise routines, health advice, all carefully organised. Here everything is connected. What grows shapes what is eaten. What is eaten shapes the body. The body shapes what work can be done, and the work shapes survival. There is no separation, only cycles. You stand and walk a short distance away from the centre of the settlement where the ground is less worn. Here plants grow more freely and the air feels slightly fresher. You take a deep breath, noticing the difference. The world is becoming more settled, but not entirely. Movement still exists. Hunting still matters. Gathering still continues. The old ways do not disappear overnight. They blend with the new, creating a layered life that is both familiar and different. Some interpretations suggest that this blending period may have lasted for many generations, with communities shifting back and forth between strategies depending on conditions. Others propose that once certain thresholds were crossed, such as population size or resource pressure, more permanent changes became harder to reverse. You look back toward the settlement again. Smoke rising, people working, children learning, animals resting, food being prepared. It feels stable, but beneath that stability change continues. You return to the fire and sit once more, feeling the warmth against your hands. The ground beneath you is firm, shaped by repeated use. The air carries the sounds of daily life, steady and unhurried. A person nearby begins weaving again, their hands moving with quiet precision. Another sharpens a blade. Someone else checks the stored food lifting coverings and replacing them carefully. These small acts build a new kind of world, not one of sudden transformation, but one of gradual adjustment. The Ice Age has ended, but its influence lingers in the land, in the memory of animals, in the habits of people. At the same time, something else is taking shape, something that will carry forward into the centuries ahead. You lean back slightly, watching the light shift as the sun begins its slow descent. The body adapts. The land adapts. Life continues. And in this quiet space between what was and what will be, you can feel the subtle weight of change settling not just around you, but within you. You rise from the warmth of the fire and follow a narrow path that leads away from the cluster of shelters, your steps guided more by curiosity than necessity. The air feels lighter out here, less thick with smoke and daily activity. The ground is softer, scattered with fallen leaves and small stones that shift gently beneath your feet. Not far from the settlement, you notice something unusual, objects that do not belong here, at least not naturally. A smooth, dark stone sits near the base of a tree, its surface glinting slightly in the sunlight. It is different from the pale, rough stones scattered across the ground. Nearby a small shell lies half buried in the soil, its curved shape catching your eye. You kneel and pick it up. It is worn smooth as if it has travelled far. Because it has. Long before roads mark it or written records, people were already moving objects across surprising distances. Not in large shipments, not with organised caravans, but through repeated exchanges, small movements and shared connections between groups. Archaeological evidence reveals that materials like obsidian shells, pigments and certain types of stone were transported far from their original sources, sometimes across hundreds of kilometres. These items did not move on their own. They were carried, traded, gifted, or passed from one group to another over time. You turn the shell in your hand. It smells faintly of salt even here, far from the sea. The edges are worn, softened by handling. This is not just a discarded object. It has been valued, kept, and carried. You walk back toward the settlement, noticing more of these small details. A bead made from bone, carefully shaped and smoothed. A fragment of bright red pigment stored in a pouch. A stone blade made from material not found nearby. These objects tell quiet stories of movement, of connection, of people meeting, exchanging, sharing. You sit near a group of individuals who are examining a collection of items laid out on a hide. One person gestures toward a stone tool, then toward another object. The exchange is not hurried. It is thoughtful. Each item is considered, weighed, understood. Trade in this early form is not about profit or accumulation. It is about relationships, about access to materials that cannot be found locally, about maintaining connections between groups that may only meet occasionally. A small but interesting observation is that some traded materials like obsidian can be traced back to their geological sources with remarkable accuracy. This allows modern researchers to map ancient networks of exchange, revealing connections that span vast regions. You watch as a piece of red pigment is passed from one person to another. It is bright, almost startling against the muted tones of the natural world. Pigment like this may be used for decoration, for marking objects for art, or for purposes we do not fully understand. You think about how today objects move across the world in seconds, tracked, packaged, and delivered with little thought. Here, every object that travels carries effort. Distance is measured in footsteps, not kilometres. Time is measured in seasons, not hours. You stand and walk toward the edge of the settlement again, where the river bends and disappears behind a stand of trees. You imagine other groups living along this same river upstream or downstream, each with their own knowledge, their own materials, their own stories. When these groups meet even briefly, something passes between them. Not just objects, ideas, techniques, stories. You return to the centre of the settlement as the afternoon light begins to soften. The objects you saw are being carefully stored again, wrapped in hides, placed in baskets, kept safe. They are not everyday tools. They are special. Not because they are flashy or decorative, but because they connect this place to something beyond itself. You sit near the fire once more, feeling its warmth against your hands. The sounds of the settlement continue around you, steady and familiar. But now you hear something else beneath them. A quiet network, invisible paths stretching across the land, people meeting, objects moving, knowledge spreading. The world is becoming more connected even without roads or maps. And in these small exchanges, these quiet moments of sharing, you can sense the early threads of something much larger, a web of human connection that will only grow stronger with time. You walk beyond the edge of the settlement in the late afternoon, following a narrow path that winds toward a low rise overlooking the river. The air is warmer now, holding the gentle heat of the day, and the scent of damp soil has faded into something lighter, touched by sun-warmed grass and distant water. From this higher ground, you can see the river more clearly. It bends wide through the valley, its surface catching the light in long shifting streaks. Beyond it, the land stretches out in soft layers, some green with new growth, others pale where older ground still shows through. And farther still, almost lost in the haze, you imagine the places where water once stood much lower, places that are no longer there. As the great ice sheets melted, vast amounts of water returned to the oceans, raising sea levels across the globe. Coastlines moved inward, sometimes slowly, sometimes in sudden leaps where land gave way. Areas that had once been dry ground became shallow seas, then deeper waters reshaping the edges of continents. You sit on a flat stone and look out over the valley, letting the quiet settle around you. It is difficult to imagine at first. The idea that land people once walked hunted and lived upon could now be underwater. And yet it happened. In many parts of the world, ancient coastal plains disappeared beneath rising seas. River mouths shifted. Islands formed where hills once stood alone. What had been a continuous stretch of land became broken into separate pieces divided by water. A small but fascinating detail is that some of these lost landscapes still exist beneath modern oceans, preserved in layers of sediment. In certain places, underwater archaeology has uncovered traces of ancient human activity, tool structures and even footprints hidden beneath the sea. You lean forward slightly, resting your elbows on your knees. Below you, the river continues its steady movement, unaware of the larger changes happening far beyond its banks. But it is part of that change feeding into the greater system carrying water toward the sea. You imagine standing at a distant shoreline during this time, watching the water creep closer over seasons, noticing familiar landmarks slowly disappearing. A tree that once stood at the edge of land, now surrounded by water. A path that becomes marsh, then open water. A place remembered but no longer reachable. Some researchers believe that these gradual and sometimes sudden changes in coastlines may have left deep impressions on human memory, possibly contributing to stories passed down through generations about floods or lost lands. Others suggest that while such events were real, their connection to later myths is difficult to trace with certainty. You breathe in slowly, the air warm and still. Today, rising sea levels are discussed in reports, charts and predictions. Here they would have been experienced directly through shifting ground and changing horizons. No explanation, just observation, an adaptation. You stand and walk along the ridge, your steps slow and unhurried. The ground here is dry, dotted with small stones and patches of grass. In the distance you see birds moving along the river's edge, their shapes small against the wide landscape. Back at the settlement, smoke rises in thin lines, marking the presence of people in this changing world. You think about how movement itself must have been affected by these rising waters. Routes once taken may have become blocked. New paths would need to be found. Crossings that were simple may have become dangerous. Travel becomes not just a matter of distance, but of memory and adjustment. You pause and look down again at the river, tracing its path with your eyes as it winds through the valley. Water reshapes everything it touches. Slowly, patiently, without pause. You turn and begin to walk back toward the settlement, the light softening around you as evening approaches once more. The air cools slightly, and the scent of smoke grows stronger as you near the fires. People move about their tasks, unaware of the vast changes happening beyond their immediate view, yet fully engaged in responding to the world as they experience it. That is how change is lived. Not as a single event, but as a series of moments, a path that no longer exists, a shoreline that has moved, a memory of a place that is now gone. You sit by the fire again, feeling its warmth settle into your hands. The river continues to flow. The land continues to shift, And somewhere far away the sea continues to rise quietly, rewriting the edges of the world. You remain by the fire as night settles once more over the settlement, the glow of several hearths blending into a soft scattered light across the clearing. The air cools gently, carrying the scent of smoke, drying fish and damp earth. Somewhere nearby, water continues its steady movement, unseen but constant. The place feels familiar now, not just a camp, something more anchored. By morning, you follow a small group leaving the settlement, heading toward a stretch of land where the river bends sharply, and the ground rises just enough to stay dry even after heavy rain. The walk is quiet. The path is worn not deeply, but enough to show repeated passage. When you arrive, you notice something immediately. The structures here are different. Still simple, still made from natural materials, but more solid. The walls are thicker, the shapes more defined. Some are partially sunk into the ground, offering better protection from wind and temperature changes. Others are built up with layers of mud reeds and wood, forming stronger barriers. This is not a temporary stop. It is a place designed to last longer. In parts of the Near East, early settlements like Jericho began to appear around the end of the Ice Age and into the early Holocene. These places show signs of more permanent occupation, including substantial structures, storage facilities, and even early forms of communal organization. You walk slowly between the dwellings, taking in the details. The ground is packed firm, shaped by many feet over time. Paths connect one structure to another. There are areas set aside for specific activities: food preparation, toolmaking, storage. It feels organized even without formal planning. A person passes by carrying a bundle of reeds, nodding briefly as they move toward a structure that appears to be under repair. Another kneels near a pit, carefully adjusting its covering. A child runs past, then slows when called back, their steps echoing lightly on the hardened earth. You place your hand against one of the walls. It is cool, slightly rough and solid in a way that hide and wood alone cannot provide. The material holds the memory of many days of work layered and shaped to resist weather. A subtle but telling observation from early settlements is the presence of storage spaces built into or beneath structures. These suggest not only longer stays but also planning for the future. Food is not just gathered and eaten, it is kept managed, protected. You move toward the center of the settlement, where a larger open area seems to serve as a shared space. Several people are gathered here, working, talking, moving in and out of the surrounding dwellings. The sound is gentle but constant, a low hum of activity that feels different from the quieter rhythm of smaller camps. You might notice how this changes social life. More people in one place, more interactions, more cooperation, and inevitably more complexity. Some interpretations suggest that as communities grew and became more settled, new forms of social organization began to emerge. Roles may have become more defined, knowledge more specialized, relationships more structured. Others caution that these changes were gradual and varied widely from place to place, with no single path toward what we now call civilization. You sit near the edge of the open space watching as a group works together to repair a section of wall. Mud is mixed with water and plant material, then pressed into place. Hands smooth the surface, reinforcing weak points, sealing gaps. The work is shared. No one rushes. No one commands loudly. But the task is understood. A small intriguing detail is that some early settlements show evidence of communal construction projects, suggesting that people worked together to build and maintain structures that benefited the group as a whole. This kind of cooperation hints at the early roots of organized community life. You look around again, taking in the scene. Smoke rising from multiple points, structures holding their shape, people moving with purpose. This is no longer just a place to pass through. It is a place to return to stay, to build upon. You think about how today we often take permanent structures for granted. Walls, roofs, doors, all expected, all standard. Here each element represents effort, knowledge, and time. Each wall is a decision. Each roof is a commitment. You stand and walk toward the edge of the settlement, where the land slopes gently downward toward the river. From here you can see the broader landscape, the mix of forest, grassland and water that supports this place. It is not perfect. Resources can still fail. Weather can still change. But it is stable enough to encourage staying. And staying changes everything. You turn back toward the settlement as the sun begins to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground. The structures catch the light, their surfaces glowing softly in the warm tones of evening. This is not yet the world of cities, not yet the world of kingdoms or written history. But it is a step closer, a place where people begin to shape the land not just for survival, but for continuity. And as you walk back into the settlement, the sounds of daily life surrounding you once more, you can feel that shift clearly. From movement to return, from return to staying, from staying to building something that will last beyond a single lifetime. You leave the sturdier settlement behind as dawn spreads slowly across the land, turning the river silver and the low hills pale gold. The air is cool, still holding the last softness of night, and each step carries you farther from the familiar sounds of hearths, woven baskets, and voices waking under roofs of reed, wood, and earth. The path rises toward a dry open hill. At first it seems ordinary. Stone, grass, wind, a few scattered shrubs clinging to the thin soil. But as you climb, the ground begins to reveal shapes that do not belong to chance. Upright stones rise from the earth, pale and weathered, arranged in circles and curves. Some are taller than a person, some are carved. Their surfaces catch the morning light and their shadows stretch long across the ground. You have arrived at a place that feels older than explanation. In southeastern Anatolia, a site now known as Göbekli Tepe was built more than 11,000 years ago, around the transition from the late Ice Age into the early Holocene. It contains massive stone pillars arranged in circular structures, and it has challenged older assumptions about how and when complex ritual spaces appeared. You walk slowly between the stones, careful with each step. The earth is dry beneath your feet. The wind moves over the hilltop with a low, steady hush. There are no fields here in the later farming sense, no crowded city, no palace, no written signs to kindly explain what everyone was thinking. Very inconsiderate of the ancient world, but beautifully mysterious. The stones stand quietly. Some are shaped like tall T-forms, their tops broad and flat, their bodies smooth where human hands worked them. On their surfaces you see carvings of animals, foxes, birds, snakes, wild boar, creatures of the living landscape brought into stone with careful lines. You run your fingers close to the carving without touching it. The form is simple but powerful. Not decoration only, it seems. Something more intentional. A memory, a presence, perhaps a sign belonging to stories you can no longer hear. One striking detail about Göbekli Tepe is that its builders moved and raised large limestone pillars without metal. Tools wheels or draft animals. The work required planning, coordination and shared effort. However they organized it, people came together here with purpose. You stand beside one of the pillars and look outward over the surrounding land. From this height the world opens wide. Hills fold into one another. Patches of grass and wild grain shimmer in the wind. Farther away, trees gather in darker lines near water. The place is not random. It overlooks a landscape rich with animals, plants, and seasonal movement. The old idea was once quite simple. First came farming, then came villages, then came temples and ritual centres. Nice, tidy, easy to remember. Unfortunately for tidy ideas, history enjoys leaving stones in awkward places. Göbekli Tepe suggests that large ceremonial gathering places may have appeared before fully settled farming societies in this region. The question is not only what people built here, it is why they gathered. Some archaeologists view the site as a ritual or ceremonial centre, used by hunter-gatherer groups who came together seasonally. Others explore whether construction and feasting at such places may have encouraged more settled life and closer management of plants and animals. The discussion continues because the evidence is rich, but the meanings remain difficult to pin down. You hear the wind slip between the stones. It makes a soft, hollow sound like breath passing through a flute. Grass stirs at the base of the pillars. Small insects move in the sunlight. The place is quiet now, but you imagine it filled with people. Groups arriving from different directions. Bundles carried on backs. Children staring wide-eyed at the great stones. Fires burning, meat roasting. Voices rising, then falling into the night. Perhaps there were gatherings here where stories were told, alliances renewed, food shared, and memories fixed to place. Perhaps the stones held meanings connected to animals, ancestors, danger seasons, or worlds beyond ordinary sight. You cannot know for certain. And strangely, the uncertainty makes the place feel even more alive. A lesser-known feature of Göbekli Tepe is that some enclosures were deliberately filled in after use. Rather than simply being abandoned to decay, parts of the site appear to have been buried. That act may have been practical, ritual, symbolic, or all three. The ancient builders did not just create the place. In some cases, they also closed it. You step into the centre of one circular arrangement. The stones surround you, silent and watchful. The morning sun touches their upper edges while the ground remains cool in shadow. You feel small here, not in a frightening way, but in the way people often feel beneath stars, mountains, or very old trees. The people who made this place still hunted wild animals. They gathered wild plants. They knew the seasonal movements of herds and the ripening of grasses. Yet they also created a monumental space that required cooperation beyond the needs of a single family or small camp. This is one of the great surprises of the post-Ice Age world. People were not simply stumbling from survival into civilization. They were imagining, gathering, building meaning into stone. Today we often think of major buildings as products of states, budgets, permits, and someone emailing everyone about a revised timeline. Here, long before bureaucratic misery achieves its mature form, people are moving huge stones, because something about this place matters enough. You walk around another pillar and notice the carved shape of a fox, its body narrow, its movement captured in a few confident lines. Foxes are clever animals, liminal in many traditions, moving between open ground and hidden places. Did they mean something similar here? We cannot say. But the care of the carving tells you that the animal was not casual. Beyond the circle you see signs of food preparation, stone tools, animal bones. Traces of feasting have been found at sites like this, suggesting that shared meals may have been part of gathering. Food once again sits at the heart of social life. It draws people together. It marks events. It turns a place into a memory. As the sun rises higher, the stones lose their long shadows and stand brighter against the sky. The hilltop warms. The scent of dry grass grows stronger. A bird circles overhead, then disappears beyond the ridge. You stand still a moment longer. Behind you lies the world of camps, rivers, shelters, tools, and early planting. Ahead lies the long future of villages, fields, temples, cities, and written names. But here on this hill, the line between those worlds is beautifully blurred. People without cities have built something monumental. People without writing have left a message in stone. And as you walk slowly away from the circle, the carved animals remain behind you, watching the morning as they have watched it for thousands of years, patient, silent, and full of questions. You walk down from the hill of carved stones as the day opens wider, leaving the silent pillars behind in the morning light. The wind follows you for a while, brushing through dry grass, carrying the scent of sun-warmed earth and distant plants. When you look back, the stones stand against the sky, like figures remembering something no one has yet written down. The path descends toward a greener valley. Here the world feels softer than the frozen landscapes where your journey began. There is still cold in the shadows, still uncertainty in the seasons, still danger in hunger, weather, and illness. But the old Ice Age world has loosened. Its great white weight has drawn back. Rivers flow more freely. Forests hold their ground. Grasslands shimmer in warmer light. Wetlands hum with insects and birds. You're entering the Holocene. That word belongs to modern science, not to the people around you. They would not speak it while carrying baskets, mending tools, or watching clouds gather above the hills. Still, it names the warmer geological age that follows the last glacial period beginning about 11,700 years ago. It is the age in which all known written history will unfold. You follow a stream along the valley floor where reeds lean over the water and small fish flicker in the shallows. The stream murmurs over stones, a soft sound that stays with you as you walk. The air smells of damp soil leaves and distant smoke from a settlement tucked somewhere beyond the trees. This new age does not arrive like a curtain rising. It arrives in patterns, longer growing seasons, more reliable plant life in many regions, forests spreading northward, sea levels rising, human communities staying longer in favoured places, animals shifting into new ranges. Each change touches the others, nothing stands alone. A key point to remember is that the Holocene brought a relatively stable climate compared with the dramatic swings of the preceding glacial world. This stability helps support farming permanent settlements, population growth and eventually cities. Not immediately, of course. The Earth does not go from mammoth steppe to municipal paperwork overnight, though sometimes human history does feel eager to invent paperwork as soon as possible. You step into a patch of woodland where sunlight falls through leaves in soft green-gold pieces. The ground is springy with leaf litter. Somewhere above you a bird calls in a bright repeated note. The sound feels ordinary, almost modern, and that is what makes it strange. You can almost imagine later villages here, then fields, then roads, then names on maps. But for now it is only a quiet valley. The group you are following stops near a stand of nut-bearing trees. Several people begin gathering what has fallen, sorting good pieces from cracked or spoiled ones. Others inspect shrubs for berries. A child turns over a log and startles at the small creatures underneath, which is a reminder that curiosity and immediate regret are also ancient human traits. One overlooked detail from the early Holocene is how important woodland foods could become in some regions. Hazelnuts, acorns, fruits, berries, roots, and other plant resources offered seasonal abundance. Some of these foods needed careful processing to remove bitterness or toxins, which means people had to know not only what to eat, but how to make it safe. You sit near the base of a tree and watch hands at work. Nuts drop into a basket with soft little clicks. A stone tool cracks shells open. The smell is warm, woody, and faintly sweet. Nearby, someone uses a flat stone to crush plant fibers, perhaps preparing cordage or mats. The rhythm is slow and steady. The valley carries many sounds at once. Water moving, leaves stirring, birds calling, tools tapping, voices murmuring low. There is no single dramatic event here. That matters. The end of the Ice Age was not one moment when people woke up and found the future neatly waiting outside. It was a long transformation lived through small daily choices: where to settle, what to gather, when to move, which seeds to keep, which paths to trust, which stories to carry. Researchers often discuss whether climate stability itself encouraged farming, or whether human population pressure, social gatherings, and local experimentation mattered just as much. The answer likely changes depending on where you look. In Southwest Asia, wild cereals and settled communities played one role. In East Asia, rice and millet followed different paths. In the Americas, squash, maize, potatoes, and other plants would later enter human life in their own places and times. The Holocene is not a single doorway. It is many doors opening across the world. You rise and continue walking with the group. The valley widens and the trees give way to a patchwork of grass shrubs and damp ground. A small herd of deer grazes at the edge of the open space. They lift their heads when they notice movement ears turning bodies alert. Then they slip into the trees light and quick. The animals of this age are different from the vanished giants, but they are not less important. Deer bore fish, birds, cattle, ancestors, sheep, ancestors, goats, and many other species become part of new human strategies. Some will remain wild prey. Some will eventually be managed, then domesticated, then folded into village life. But here at this moment, they are simply themselves moving through the morning. You feel the sun on your face, warmer now, stronger, not hot but steady. The kind of warmth that lets plants grow longer, that softens winters, in some places that gives people enough confidence to return to a location and expect food again. Confidence is easy to underestimate. If you believe a place will feed you next season, you can build more. You can store more. You can plan. You can gather with others. You can start to think beyond tomorrow. The group reaches a small rise overlooking a settlement below. Smoke lifts from several hearths. The roofs are low, rounded and earthy. Around them lie work areas, storage places, patches of disturbed soil, and pathways worn by many feet. Children move between shelters. Dogs linger near the fires. People bend over tasks that repeat from day to day. It is still fragile. A bad season could hurt this place. A flood could change the river. A cold snap could damage plants. Disease could spread more easily when people live close together. Still, the settlement holds. Today, when we think of human history, we often begin with civilizations, kings, wars, monuments, and dates on timelines. But this quiet scene is the foundation beneath all of that. A warmer climate, a returning river, food stored in pits, seeds sorted by hand. People staying long enough for a place to become identity. You stand on the rise and let the view settle into you. The Ice Age has not vanished without trace. Its rivers, lakes, soils, boulders, coastlines, and memories remain everywhere. But the Holocene opens a wider, more familiar world, one where human life begins to gather around homes, fields, animals, rituals, and shared places. You hear the stream behind you, the settlement before you, the wind moving through grass. The old cold world has softened, and in the softness, humanity begins to build. You remain on the rise for a while, watching the settlement below as the day moves slowly toward afternoon. The light grows warmer, settling gently over the roofs and pathways, turning smoke into soft drifting ribbons. From here, everything looks calm, almost effortless. But as you begin to walk down toward the dwellings again, you start to notice something quieter beneath the surface. The cost of staying. You pass by a group working near one of the storage pits. The covering is lifted, and inside bundles of dried food are checked, counted, rearranged. A person brushes away insects from the edges. Another adjusts a stone lid more tightly into place. The care is constant, almost protective. Stored food is security, but it is also something that must be guarded. You move on and see two individuals speaking in low, serious tones near a pile of gathered materials. Their gestures are small but deliberate. A tool is lifted, examined, set down again. A pause follows. It is not conflict exactly, but something close to negotiation. In a world where people carry what they need and move often, ownership is simpler. When you settle, when you store, when you return again and again to the same place, questions begin to change. Whose food? Whose shelter? Whose land? Evidence from early settled communities suggests that more permanent living arrangements may have brought new social challenges alongside their benefits. With people living closer together for longer periods, interactions increased, and with them the need for shared rules, agreements, and ways of resolving tension. You walk past a row of shelters and notice how some appear more maintained than others. A wall here is freshly repaired. Another shows signs of wear. There's a small difference, but it stands out. Differences begin to appear, subtle at first, then more noticeable. You sit near a fire where a group is preparing food. The process is familiar, but the mood feels slightly different today. Quieter, more inward. People focus on their tasks, speaking less, watching more. A small but telling detail from early village life is that increased population density often led to changes in how waste was managed, how space was used, and how people interacted daily. These adjustments were necessary but not always easy. You look around the settlement again, this time with a different awareness. The paths are more defined, the space is more divided, the routines more structured. These are signs of stability, but also of complexity. You think about how today we often imagine progress as something purely positive, a steady movement toward comfort and improvement. But here in this early stage, every gain carries something alongside it. More food can mean more people. More people can mean more pressure. More stability can mean less flexibility. More connection can mean more conflict. You stand and walk toward the edge of the settlement where the land opens again toward the river. The air feels lighter here, less crowded with activity. You take a deep breath, letting the scent of water and grass settle in your lungs. A dog-like companion follows at a distance, then stops watching you. Its presence is steady, familiar, now part of the background of life. You sit on a stone and look out across the land. The forests, the grasslands, the river. All still there, all still offering. The old ways have not vanished. They remain just beyond the edge of the settlement. You could walk away, follow the river, return to movement, to wider space, to fewer boundaries. Some people likely did exactly that. Not everyone chose to stay. Interpretations differ on how universal the shift towards settled life was at this time. In many regions, groups continued mobile or semi-mobile lifestyles for thousands of years, alongside more settled communities. There was no single path, no universal decision. You pick up a small stone and turn it in your hand, feeling its weight. Choice. That is what this moment holds. Not a forced transformation, but a set of possibilities. Stay, move, store, gather, plant, hunt. Each path carries its own balance of risk and reward. You stand again and begin to walk back toward the settlement, the sounds of daily life growing clearer with each step. Voices, tools, fire movement all blending into a steady rhythm. This is what has been gained. Stability, return, connection. This is what has been set aside. Some freedom, some simplicity, some of the wide-open uncertainty of constant movement. You step back into the circle of firelight as evening approaches, the warmth reaching out to meet you. The settlement holds its shape. The land continues to change, and you standing between both can feel the weight of what has been gained and what has quietly been left behind. You settle once more near the fire as evening drapes itself softly over the settlement, the sky deepening into shades of blue and grey. The warmth touches your hands, steady and familiar now, while beyond the glow the land stretches outward into darkness, carrying all the quiet changes you have walked through. The people around you move through their routines with practiced ease. Food is prepared, tools are checked, children are guided gently toward rest. The dog-like companions circle paws and settle into places they seem to have chosen long ago. Everything feels ordinary, and yet everything is new. You look down at your hands, faintly marked by dust ash and the memory of soil. These hands could belong to any time in some ways. They have gathered, carried, shaped and rested. The actions are ancient, but also familiar. That is when you begin to notice something deeper. The echoes. Not loud, not obvious, but present. The way food is prepared here slowly, carefully reminds you of kitchens far in the future. The shared work, the passing of tools, the quiet teaching between generations. The feeling of returning to a place and expecting to find others there. These are not inventions of later civilization. They are continuations. Many aspects of modern human life have roots in this period following the Ice Age. Settled living, food, storage, plant cultivation, animal companionship, long-distance exchange, shared rituals, and the shaping of landscapes all begin to take recognizable form here. You watch as someone adjusts a covering over a storage pit, pressing it firmly into place. The action is simple, but it carries intention. Preserve. Protect. Return later. Nearby, a child plays with a small object, turning it over and over in their hands. It might be a bead, a shaped piece of bone, something with no immediate use but clear meaning. The child's focus is complete, absorbed in the object, as if it holds a story. You think about how today we surround ourselves with objects that carry memory. Photos, keepsakes, small items that seem insignificant to others, but matter deeply to us. That impulse is already here. You lean back slightly, watching the sparks rise from the fire and disappear into the night. Above you the stars stretch across the sky, unchanged by the transformations below. The same constellations that watched over Ice Age hunters now shine above early settlements. The same sky that will one day hang over cities' roads in electric light. Time moves forward, but it also carries things with it. A quiet observation from anthropological research is that many core human behaviours, social bonding, storytelling, cooperation and shared learning, have remained remarkably consistent over long stretches of time, even as environments and technologies changed. You listen as a low voice begins to speak nearby. A story, perhaps. The tone is calm, rhythmic, almost like the fire itself. Others listen, their attention soft but steady. The words are not for you to understand fully, but the feeling is clear. Connection, memory, continuity. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound settle around you. The fire, the voices, the distant river, the soft movement of wind through trees. When you open them again, you see the settlement differently. Not just as a place in the past, but as a beginning that stretches forward. The seeds planted here, both literal and symbolic, will grow into villages, towns, cities, and entire cultures. The choices made in moments like this will ripple outward through generations, shaping the world in ways no one here could fully imagine. And yet in this moment, none of that matters. What matters is the fire, the food, the people, the place. You shift slightly, feeling the ground beneath you solid and familiar. The warmth of the fire continues to reach you steady and comforting. You think about how in your own time it is easy to feel distant from this world, to imagine it as something completely separate, something finished and gone. But sitting here you can feel the connection, in the way people gather, in the way they share, in the way they adapt. And these are not lost behaviours. They are carried forward. You look out into the darkness beyond the settlement where the land stretches into shadow. Somewhere out there are the paths you walked before, the melting ice, the shifting animals, the growing forests, the rising waters. All of it still part of this world, all of it part of what came next. You return your gaze to the fire, watching the flames move gently, their light steady and calm. The Ice Age has ended, but its story has not disappeared. It lives on here, in quiet ways, in everyday actions, in the foundations of everything that follows. And as the night deepens and the settlement settles into rest, you sit in that understanding. Feeling the past and present draw a little closer together. You sit through the last deep hours of night as the settlement grows quiet around you. One by one the fires shrink into soft beds of red ash. The voices fade. The river continues beyond the dark, moving with the same calm patience it has carried through your whole journey. Above you the stars remain bright, scattered across the sky like tiny marks left by someone who knew how to make silence beautiful. This is the morning after the ice. Not one morning really, but a long unfolding dawn across generations. The Ice Age has ended, yet the world still carries its memory. Glacial lakes glitter in newly carved basins. Strange boulders rest in fields where no matching stone belongs. Valleys hold the shape of ancient ice. Coastlines lie far beyond old walking paths. Rivers run through channels made by meltwater, and the soil itself keeps traces of cold dust, flood and renewal. You rise before sunrise and walk toward the edge of the settlement. The air is cool but not bitter. It touches your face gently. The ground beneath you is firm from many footsteps, and the path curves toward the river like something the whole community has written slowly with its feet. Behind you people sleep inside low shelters. Nearby stored food waits in covered pits. At the river fish traps tremble in the current. Beyond the clearing wild grasses bend beneath dew. The world feels held together by habits. Small habits, ancient habits, human habits. By about 11,700 years ago, the Holocene had begun bringing the warmer and more stable climate that would make farming villages and later civilization possible in many regions. But here from inside the story, it does not feel like the start of civilization. It feels like another morning of work, weather, food, and family. You watch the horizon brighten, first grey, then pale blue, then a faint wash of gold. A bird calls from the reeds. Another answers from the trees. Somewhere in the settlement a child wakes and murmurs. A dog-like companion lifts its head, listens, then rests again, deciding the world is not yet interesting enough to stand up for. Fair enough. Some mornings ask for patience. You walk toward the planted patch near the settlement edge. The soil is still dark from recent turning. Nothing tall grows there yet, but the place is remembered. A few stones mark its boundary. Someone has cleared away competing plants. Someone will return to check it later. A small detail worth carrying with you is that early cultivation often began in ways so modest they would be easy to miss archaeologically. A patch of disturbed soil, a slightly different plant population, a gathering habit repeated often enough to change the future. History does not always begin with monuments. Sometimes it begins with someone deciding not to eat every seed. You kneel and touch the ground. It is cool and damp. Beneath the surface, unseen possibility waits. This is where the story becomes both larger and quieter. The great ice sheets have retreated. The giants have begun to vanish. The forests have spread. The seas have risen, and people adaptable as ever have changed with the world. They have followed rivers, shaped tools, gathered seeds, painted animals, built shelters, stored food, traded shells, lived beside dogs and raised stones beneath the open sky. None of it happens all at once. None of it is simple. But together these acts become the foundation of the human world you know. Specialists still examine how much of this transformation was driven by climate, how much by population growth, how much by social gathering, and how much by human curiosity itself. The answer is probably not one thing. It is a braid of causes twisted together across regions, seasons, and generations. You stand and look back at the settlement as smoke begins to rise from the first rekindled fire. Someone steps outside carrying a basket. Someone else bends to stir ashes. A child runs barefoot over the packed earth, then stops to watch a bird. The morning is ordinary, and that is what makes it powerful. Because history is not only battles, kings, inventions, and ruins. It is also this: a person feeding a fire, a hand sorting seeds, a family remembering where to find water, a community deciding little by little to stay. Today you live in a world shaped by that decision. Your meals, your home, your pets, your roads, your cities, your sense of belonging to a place, all carry faint echoes of this long post-Ice Age morning. The people here cannot imagine your world with its glowing screens and humming rooms and suspiciously complicated coffee choices, but you can recognise theirs. You know the desire for warmth, for food, for safety, for company, for a place to return to when the day grows dark. The sun lifts higher now, touching the roofs, the river, the grasses, and the stones. Dew flashes briefly before fading. The air warms against your skin. You hear the settlement waking fully. Not loudly, not suddenly. Just slowly, gently, like the earth itself. And as you stand there, you understand what really happened when the Ice Age ended. The world did not simply become warmer. It became newly possible. Possible for forests to return. Possible for rivers to anchor communities. Possible for plants to be tended. Possible for animals to be drawn closer. Possible for people to gather, store, build, remember, and imagine. The end of the Ice Age was not only the melting of ice. It was the opening of a door, and through it, step by step, carrying baskets, tools, stories, children, dogs, seeds, and fire, humanity began walking toward the future. The morning grows softer now. You do not need to walk any farther. The settlement behind you fades into quiet movement, smoke rising in thin blue threads, voices, low footsteps, gentle on the packed earth. The river keeps its calm rhythm, carrying meltwater memory and sunlight toward places you will never see tonight. The great ice is far away now, still present in the land, still remembered in stone and water, but no longer pressing so heavily on the horizon. You can let the images loosen. The mammoth tracks filling with rain, the cave wall glowing in torchlight, the wild wheat moving in the breeze, the first shelters holding warmth against the dark. All of it drifts together, now slow and weightless. You breathe in the scent of smoke, damp grass, and morning earth. You feel the last coolness of dawn on your face and the first warmth of sunlight on your hands. Somewhere a bird calls once then grows quiet. Somewhere a fire settles with a soft crackle. The ancient people continue their day, but you may rest. They will tend the seeds. They will follow the river. They will mend the tools. They will tell the stories. And the world will keep turning gently, patiently, carrying the memory of ice into forests, fields, villages, and dreams. For now, there is nothing more you need to do. The path is quiet. The sky is pale. The fire is warm. And the long night of history settles around you like a soft covering. Sweet dreams.